Anti-Mage and Isekai LitRPG Adventure, Ends of Magic Book 1, Audiobook by Kevin Chapter 25. The Origin of Corruption. Nathan sat atop the mountain, considering what he'd learned. He had one answer but many more questions. The seal filtered out deadly magic around Gemor, exchanging it for magic that encouraged life. But why? How far did its reach extend? What happened when those switches were swapped to other positions? Something about the filtering changes, most likely. He opened his eyes and looked to the sky. He'd been sitting here for hours, though not long enough for the sun to darken. The burning orb sat in the sky directly overhead, but he wasn't looking at the sky of this moment. He was consulting his memory, recalling a cloudless night, when the world above revealed hundreds of continents, many infected by huge patches of white and black that looked like spreading blight. He remembered the night of the solstice, when the sun had gone out. Every single seal across Davrar had awakened, creating a network of light and magic that connected to the sun. He'd noticed that every patch of spreading blight had been centered around a seal that nonetheless had contributed power during the night of the solstice. With that information, Nathan directed his attention back down into the mountain. He noted the switches, watching how they connected through the rest of the machine. This time he asked the right question. How would the ambient mana change if the switch was flipped? The answer was clear. The mana flows would be rerouted, passing through different converters and then being released to fill Davrar with corruption. The left side would convert much of the ambient mana to the same corruptive death magic Nathan had felt from the grave tangle, blighting the land and covering the sky with darkness. The right side wasn't quite as obvious. It seemed to involve several different mana types, including crystal, light, and a few more that Nathan wasn't familiar with. But they seemed likely to have the same effect of making the land uninhabitable for hundreds of miles in every direction. The seals didn't start the endings, they were another danger altogether. Congratulations, you have developed the wizard's understanding, utility skill into arcane insight. Utility skill, arcane insight, you understand the arcane. Nice. I guess arcane means mana and wizardry together, and maybe more. Nathan rose to his feet, stretching and looking down at the seal before him. The 40-foot circle of carved stone looked like a secure vault, not a machine that kept the continent healthy and could just as easily doom it. My guess is that during the solstice it's possible for somebody to hit the switch, especially a monster. If they let a single monster through, it would be enough. I bet there are other rules, like once the switch has been flipped it can't change again until the next solstice. I imagine it would be quite an adventure to fight your way across hundreds of miles of blighted territory to reach the seal on the solstice and restore the land. On any other day it would take a powerful wizard or a powerful anti-mage. This seems like something aimed at questers. Void of Magic has leveled to level 729. Congratulations! You have uncovered the secret of the seals and the power to unleash corruption upon the land. Please choose a developed class from the following list. Potential classes. End of Magic, where you pass, magic ends. With this class your aura will expand to a storm, and you will smother magical catastrophes of every kind. Your anti-magic will obey your will, targeting only that which you wish to end. Upon this path, you and your anti-magic will dominate the battlefield as an ending dominates a continent. Nullmage. You wield anti-magic as an archmage wields mana. With this class you will be able to create constructs of anti-magic that have a long-lasting effect and grant high-tier magic resistance to those you train. Upon this path, you will help protect all civilization from magical scourges and leave the gift of anti-magic wherever you travel. Slayer of Giants. You have slain the last of the giants, ancient guardians of Davrar turned bitter in their graves. With this class you will gain the strength and nobility of the lost giants, becoming a beacon and inspiring defender of civilization on Davrar. Upon this path, you will embody their power, guiding others with ancient wisdom and unparalleled might. Undying. You defy death in all of its forms. With this class, your endurance and willpower will reach incredible levels, dramatically boosting the regeneration of all resources. You will also become difficult to entrap, ensuring that there is no simple path to defeat. Upon this path, you will be an unbreakable thorn in your foes' sides, impossible to defeat with simple means. Warden of the Arcane, you pass judgment on dishonorable magic users. With this class, you will gain the ability to detect evil deeds and mark those who have done evil. Those marked will not be able to flee you, and you will gain significant advantages against them. Upon this path, you will maintain the balance of magical power, ensuring it is used for the good of all. Nathan blinked up at the notifications in surprise, open-mouthed and gratified. He'd been hoping for this. He'd noticed how close he was getting to the level 729 milestone and had considered going off into the wilds to hunt down some monsters for the necessary levels. But it hadn't felt right. Anti-Mage was Nathan's primary class, and the results of this development would stay with him for the next 1,500 levels. He didn't want to earn his next class killing stalkers, but deciphering the secrets of the seals, learning about corruption, that felt right. Maybe that's why I have 5 options instead of the more common 2, though at least one of those is just there from the grave of all giants. I hope that wasn't the enhancement that was mentioned. He gave the options a quick once-over, forming a few initial opinions. He couldn't dismiss any of the options immediately, though Slayer of Giants was close. End of Magic seemed the most directly anti-magic oriented, but maybe it was time to step outside of that box. He just had proof that his anti-magic was already good enough to beat a quester. Nullmage would let Nathan do more for Gemor. He could train more anti-mages and leave anti-magic constructs behind to suppress dungeons or protect the villages. It would be an excellent class if he intended to stay and fight against the endings. But that wasn't the plan. Undying continued the train of classes he'd been offered to upgrade his healing, though this one was more tempting than any of the previous options. It would boost both his regeneration and stamina and help him escape from capture. That meant it was worth considering, even if Nathan already thought his healing to be perfectly sufficient. Warden of the Arcane was interesting. It seemed optimized for one-on-one duels against other people. If he did end up having to hunt questers across Davrar, it would be a good choice. But it didn't seem like it would help much against their minions, and every quester seemed to run at least one kingdom. Nathan let out a deep sigh as he stepped off the stage and walked towards the edge of the mountaintop. He was still deep in thought when a beam of light lanced up from Gemor to burn a hole in one of the sporadic clouds above. He blinked in confusion for a second before a boom rolled across the mountain. That was one of Stella's lasers, or at least the ionization trail from it. What's going on down there? Nathan sprinted forwards to throw himself off the mountain for the second time in his life. He scanned Gemor for attackers, focusing on the Caxal residence. That was where the heirs were supposed to be. He didn't see anybody except for some guards who'd mobilized from the noise. A moment later, he understood what was going on. He slowed his fall from terminal velocity to something a bit easier to control, gently steering himself towards the small but lush garden outside the mansion where Stella had grown up. He landed in the garden just a few feet behind Stella, who was red-faced and yelling at her parents. Younger does not mean weaker. I killed a grave tangle just days ago and have dueled archmages. This is our path to follow, and you cannot stop us from walking it. Dalo's face was fixed in a deep frown as he stared down at his daughter, stroking his beard. A powerful spell, but you do not have water mana yet. You will be disadvantaged at sea. Stella looked over to Nathan and let out a slow breath, seeming to take reassurance from his presence. I will learn or I won't. We're still going. Cullel stepped forward, laying a furred hand on her daughter's shoulder. If the task is so weighty, the guardians will go. You're powerful enough to stay here and protect Gemor. You can inherit our duties. No, Stella shook her mother's hand off and looked up with angry eyes. We swore this oath and the time of prophecy has arrived. She turned to Nathan. Tell them what the quester told you about the ending of history, why we need to go. Nathan sighed. The council asked me not to spread that around. Stella's expression was demanding, pleading. She was willing to defy her parents on this, but she'd prefer that he convince them because they weren't listening to her. He dipped his head. Everybody should hear this together. Where are the others? Cullo cast a quick muffle spell, and soon enough the rest of Nathan's friends emerged into the garden followed by their parents. Stanel stayed close to his children, a resigned look on his face. Kia's expression was carved from ice as she followed Katja out, and she shot a frigid glance towards Nathan. Once they were all inside the privacy spell, Nathan spoke. I defeated him. Batad swore that he'd bring the ending of history down upon us. 100 years, but I don't know if that's the truth. The only way to stop it is to go out there to find the questers. I told the full details to the council. Dalo's eyes crackled with light, and he lifted a few feet into the air. When he spoke, his voice was thick with anger. Then your quest has already doomed us all. He advanced towards Nathan, arcs of lightning connecting him to the ground with momentary flashes. Nathan rolled his eyes and suppressed a flash of irritation at the man's melodrama. He stepped up to meet Dalo, letting his aura spill out and suppress the unfocused mana that sparked through the air. All I did was fight our enemies and I won, but they're not done yet. This is one more challenge to conquer. We will go forth into Davrar and stop the ending of history. And if we fail, we will come back and protect Gemor from it. We are elite adventurers, and this is what we swore. The older man scoffed. None of you have reached level 729. You are not powerful enough for. He paused at the derisive smirk on Nathan's face. Nathan pointed towards the mountain arching overhead. I just learned the secret of the seals and reached level 729. I haven't chosen my class, but I do have 5 options. He paused, seeing expressions of shock cross the faces of the guardians. Then he stepped forward, cutting off the magic that was holding Dalo aloft. The mage dropped to the ground, catching himself with a huff. Okay, maybe I'm a little annoyed. Nathan wasn't done talking, even as Kia's hand rose to grasp her sword. The heirs are powerful. We have inherited your insights and forged our own paths atop them. I am the one who has killed a quester, and Davrar will back up that claim to impress upon other questers that they should listen to me. He glanced towards his friends. Did you tell them about the fight versus the undead army? Kia broke in, her voice sharp and her hand on the hilt of her gigantic sword. They did, and we will speak on that later, but the seal waking giants, did you tamper with it? Nathan shook his head vehemently. No, I know what it does. It's safe, and any tampering will only make it dangerous. It could kill Gemor if somebody did the wrong thing. Blasphemous secrets of Kali's, Stanel swore. More dangers. What is the secret of the seals? I don't know if I should tell you, Nathan responded pointedly. Keep protecting it from monsters on the solstice and you'll be good. Any other time of year and somebody would need to be a powerful archmage or antimage to do anything. Then we will keep your antimages away from it, Kia said quickly. They're not powerful enough for that, Nathan replied, then thought about it for a moment. Yet, but they might be. They have the necessary insights, but they don't need access, he conceded. Nobody knew how to respond to that, and there was a moment of awkward silence. Then Arl spoke up. 5 level 729 class options, eh? Dragon's Breath. The silence continued for another few seconds. Cullo walked up to her husband and snuggled into his side. We've only fought monsters for years. The heirs have faced questers and mages. Nathan needs to be there to speak to the questers. This isn't something we can do, is it? Dalo wrapped his arms around her and rested his chin on top of her head. Hear me, I wish it were otherwise. He glanced over to Stella, his eyes sad. When will you come back? I don't know, Years, she glanced around at the other heirs who all shrugged in various ways. It's a journey into the unknown. Nathan appraised the guardians of Gemor, raising an eyebrow to ask if there were any more challenges. Stanel shook his head, expression downcast. Cullo met his gaze with faint tears in her eyes but did not speak. Dalo sighed loudly. Kia returned his look evenly. I do not object. Kachai's power has grown beyond my ability to guide. His is a dangerous path, but I will trust the man I raised. She smiled, the expression weary on her angelic face. It seems the matter is settled. If this is to be the last time we see each other for years, we should remember it joyously. We have some time, so let us go inside and create a memory to light the way in darker times. They all trooped inside as Kia took on the task of reviving the party. Soon enough they were all seated in comfortable chairs with hot food spread around them and the drinks flowing. Idle conversation started back up slowly, but it did start. Dalo eyed Nathan over the rim of his glass, morbid curiosity on his face. Stella said you went inside the academy. What was it like? Nathan snorted, putting down the glass of syrupy purple liquor he was drinking. A mess. The lecturers were awful teachers. I swear they didn't have a single teaching skill among them. They all thought they'd be archmages and that teaching was a chore. He reached for a bowl of some kind of fried meat. But they had so many insights, and the academy itself was designed to teach magic. The dining halls were shaped like specific spells. He went on to describe some of the things he'd seen inside the academy, quickly gathering everybody's interest with his descriptions. The heirs had heard some of this before, but Nathan hadn't exhausted every detail. Stanel spoke up when he started winding down. I won't be free of regret until I hear how you fought Equester and won. Well, it helped that I'm an anti-mage and he's a mage, Nathan pointed out. I wouldn't do as well against Brox, though I bet Arl and Sarah together could take him. Friends looked up with wide eyes. Nathan shrugged. Believe in yourselves, questers aren't invincible. Brox is just fast and has good gear. Arl can block him, then Sarah lines up a shot. His enchantments might block it, but that's something I can fix. Stanel opened his mouth, but Kia interrupted him by rapping her knuckles on the table. Let us hear this story as a tale in its proper order. I would hear your account as it begins when you entered Giant's Rest, especially of the deeds of Phaeline. Nathan grimaced. Ah, yeah, you were right about her. The city was in lockdown as we approached, so I flew us in over the walls. Chapter 26, A Fond Farewell by the Steel of Damon. I swear I'll slay her next time I see her. May my magic fade if it should be otherwise. Kia made the oath quietly, but her eyes flared with divine fire as she spoke. Nathan had no doubts that the woman would attempt to fulfill that oath at her next opportunity, and he wasn't going to argue. Phaeline had been operating in Giant's Rest for a while, and given what he'd seen of her methods, it was likely she'd done a few things that went beyond the pale. But it likewise wasn't his place to be a judge of either of them. If I know Phaeline, she's not going to show herself before Kia. She'll know I'd tell the story, especially after our last meeting. With her skills, she could just vanish into any city or board a ship with nobody the wiser. She doesn't even need to recruit for the assassins of Gemor anymore. I wouldn't be surprised if she just disappears after this. I hope she can find a new mission in life, but she fought long enough for her cause that I don't know if she can let it go. Nobody had any commentary on Kia's oath, so Nathan continued telling his story. Stanel thought that Nathan disguising himself as a student in the academy was hilarious, and Cullo asked for more details on the magical classes, because she was thinking of teaching magic to the younger adventurers. He shared his low opinion of the academy's teaching techniques, though he conceded it let the mages level without requiring them to fight. What everybody wanted to hear was Nathan's description of his fight against Badud. He had some difficulty describing the quester's spells without slipping into scientific terminology that was unfamiliar to the Guardians. That bothered Dalo. Unless this light blinds me, it seems that you share many insights with Badud. His look towards Nathan wasn't quite accusing, but it certainly demanded an explanation. Nathan gave a heavy sigh and looked around at his teammates. He'd meant to discuss his suspicions about the questers, but had never found the right time for the weight of the topic. This probably isn't a good time either. None of them really have the context to understand what I mean in describing Davrar as a game. Sarah already got most of the way there when she called all of this entertainment for them. I think they have a lot of scientific insights, and some of Badud's most powerful spells were based on them. That's probably part of why the questers are so strong, Nathan agreed. But Badud didn't share those with Giant's Rest. Maybe he didn't want them to get too powerful, or maybe he couldn't for some reason. If Davrar is a game, it would make sense to place limitations on what scientific insights you could share, unless you wanted it to stop being fantasy and start being sci-fi. My bones say that these divine artifacts are the true worry, Kia said. You say he used something called the last arrows of Alita to destroy the academy. Her expression was troubled as she stared into her glass of liquor. Well, he tried to hit me, Nathan replied. It's just that the academy was behind me, but it was definitely a physical artifact that was consumed in the casting. Kia's expression remained downcast, and she quoted from memory. And lo, did Alita rise from the blood-soaked fields, her visage fierce and unyielding. She grasped her mighty bow Brangle, forged in the fire of the first conflict, and her burning arrows blotted out the sky. The clouds trembled and the earth quaked beneath her battle fury, for she is the bringer of wrathful war. With each draw of Brangle where the wicked worms smote, their screams shattering the earth before being silenced by swift shafts. She is the embodiment of war's glory, and her presence foretells true war. She shook her head and exhaled hard, breathing out a cloud of vaguely reddish divine mana that was notably different from the golden mana she usually wielded. So it was written, and may it never be so again. Everybody silently processed Kia's words. Kia downed her drink in a single gulp and reached for more, while Kachai watched with concern. The silence stretched on until Nathan remembered something and snorted. Brock swore by Alita's flaming underpants at one point. That caused everybody to chuckle, and Kia's expression cracked into a grin. Blasphemous questers, but they were the ones to kill the gods, and I will follow that light. After that it seemed like there was both everything and nothing to say. The heirs had already told the story of their adventures since Giant's Rest, and they didn't mean to spend the night in Gemor. It seemed like an unnecessary risk with the number of assassins that were clearly after them. Sleeping in the city was just an invitation for another attempt on their lives. Nathan excused himself to walk around the garden while the heirs said their goodbyes. Night had fallen while they talked, and he looked up at the world overhead. His eyes settled on the dozens of patches of white and black that stretched across the continents above. They looked like mold, but now he knew what they really were. It didn't help him feel any better. Every time I feel like I understand this world, I discover another danger, another terror, dungeons in the sky and the depths. Endings, questers, now corruption. What else is out there? He calmed his mind. He was level 729. He was powerful by any standard. He would be able to at least fight any challenge Davrar threw at him. But for now, it was time to think about his next class development. He wasn't going to make a decision until he talked it over with the heirs, but he wanted to form his own opinion on the matter. Let's see. 5 classes, and it will be time soon to make my decision. End of Magic is almost too on the nose. But it's also the straightforward development of my anti-magic, and that's been my highest priority for the last 4 anti-mage class choices. But my anti-magic is strong enough to fight a quester. Does it need to be stronger? Nathan remembered his fight with Badud. He hadn't beaten the quester directly. He hadn't been fast enough to win that fight straight up, but he'd survived everything the man had thrown at him, then jumped the quester once he'd thought Nathan was dead. A larger aura would have helped a lot. He hit me from outside the range of my anti-magic, and I wasn't actually strong enough to directly counter all of his attacks. The last arrows of Alita pretty much vaporized me, and even that black hole spell was scary as hell. Still, it would be nice to finally pick up some physical enhancements and be able to compete with fighters of his level. He was strong enough now to throw down with slave elites and win even without his anti-magic, but somebody at his same level with a pure physical combat class would be able to hand him his own ass on a silver platter, so long as they have talents that are worth a damn and don't rely on enchanted gear. I think I could lock Arl's armor up if I wanted to. The obvious way to enhance his physical capabilities would be choosing a development that focused on his rage, but he hadn't been offered one. He'd been offered a rage-centric class at every one of his previous class developments, but not this time. His use of the skill had tailed off over time, and he supposed Davrar had noticed. The next class was Nullmage, which wasn't so much an upgrade to his anti-magic as a side grade. When he'd first read the description, he'd interpreted it as letting him plop down anti-magic beacons of some kind, but on further thought, it was more likely to let him create anti-magic enchantments. That would be pretty neat, but it wasn't something Nathan thought would actually be useful. Not for him, at least. Unless I think I can enchant something with anti-magic and magic at the same time. But given my past experience, that seems very unlikely to work. My anti-magic is just too strong, even if I have a lot of control over it now. The class also explicitly called out that it would let him grant high-tier magic resistance to future anti-mages, which would improve their survival prospects dramatically. That would be great for preparing Gemor against the future, but not necessarily for challenging the questers in the near term. Nullmage would be a perfect class for Sham. It would help him train new anti-mages, and anti-magic enchantments would allow normal people to wield it against the monsters and mages of Davrar. Next was a class that was almost the physical combat class Nathan wanted. Slayer of Giants promised to give him the strength and nobility of the Lost Giants. Neither of those were quite right, though. Nathan needed speed, not strength. He was strong enough to break most unenchanted materials already, and with his anti-magic that meant he could break most things aside from metal gates or stone walls. Unless they're conjured by mana or wizardry, in which case I can just wave my hand and they're gone. Furthermore, nobility sounded a lot like a social skill, and he'd been avoiding picking up another one of those. Inspiration already scared him, and he didn't want to waste a skill slot on something like that. Though maybe nobility is just what I need for the questers to listen to me. But they all probably have protection against social skills. It just doesn't seem like a very useful class. He'd been offered a few versions of the next class in past class options. Undying was the latest in the chain of invincible and woundless berserker. But he wasn't going to take it for the same reason he hadn't taken those. The way to avoid getting buried underground wasn't to have a skill that made you hard to trap and stamina that never ran out. It was to have other skills that ensured you never got put in that circumstance in the first place. Undying wouldn't help him win. It would just reduce the circumstances where he could lose. Those were already narrow enough that Nathan would prefer class skills that would actually let him do something new. The last option was Warden of the Arcane. The more Nathan thought about it, the more he was seriously considering it. It seemed tailor-made for his fight against Badud, solving both his problems of catching the mage quester as well as physically fighting against people who had combat-focused classes. Though it does require they have done evil, and imposes a kind of absolute morality that makes me a bit concerned. But to some extent that would have been a plus. I doubt Phelan's betrayal would have surprised me so badly if I'd seen a big flashing "evil deeds here" sign over her head. At the end of the day, it seemed like the top contenders for Nathan's primary class were End of Magic and Warden of the Arcane, with Slayer of Giants as a distant third. End of Magic would let Nathan cover an entire battlefield with his anti-magic, but wasn't as focused on fighting enemies of Nathan's level. Warden of the Arcane had some weird morality stuff, but was mostly focused on letting Nathan go up against powerful enemies. I'm legitimately not sure which is more useful. If he needed to track down the other founders of the Ascendant Academy, then Warden of the Arcane would likely be the best choice. But Nathan's eyes went upwards. Once more he traced the world overhead and found his eyes resting on the corruption blotched across the night sky. Would he end up fighting that? What was the best tool there? Based on what I felt from the grave tangles, it's corruptive magic over a huge area. I didn't have a problem breaking it with my anti-magic before, so End of Magic would be helpful but not essential. But I don't think Warden of the Arcane would do squat. The door behind him opened and Dalo stepped outside. "I'm allowing Stella a short time with her mother," he said in response to Nathan's questioning look. "To be free of regret, I would also like to apologize." Nathan realized that Dalo was expecting a response of some kind. He gave the old man a firm nod. "Yes," that seemed to be enough. "I have seen you as a fool in a dungeon since we met. A man with weighty insights but little wisdom. I merely hoped you would grant the heir some insights before you died, and teach the most important lesson of all with your death. Every adventurer must learn to bury friends, and I thought you would be that friend to our children." He shrugged apologetically. "But then you did not die. You began to lead the heirs, and I worried for my daughter that she would share your grave. But I could not scold her for that, for I was no better as a young adventurer. Davra rewards risk, and the only way for you to rise is to embrace it. But every time I saw Stella depart to potential death, it was as if I was staring the ghoul in the eye for the very first time. And then you began to teach her insights of magic. Not the small insights I had expected, but grand ones. I had expected a stalker's treasure and instead received a dragon's hoard. Stella departed from the path I had planned for her, embarking upon something new." Dalo's eyes flared slightly, embers of flame flickering sullenly. "Hear me, but that burnt my pride, that you who does not even wield magic could teach my daughter better than I could." But he waved his hand vaguely as if to encompass everything that had happened. "Then Giant's Rest happened. You rescued the heirs from an archmage and challenged a quester. You won. The Ascendant Academy is no more." The old man shook his head in disbelief. "You carry a prophecy of victory with you, and the heirs have shared the burden as well as the rewards." He turned to face Nathan fully, meeting his eyes. "I can only praise your deeds and acknowledge the debt that you have accrued. Now you lead the heirs away from the continent, away from their homes, from the place they were born to protect." Dalo mulled that statement over before sighing deeply. "But it is necessary. In going, you will rise to even greater heights. I ask only that you keep my daughter alive. My debt is already as deep as the sea, and you are the one person I cannot threaten. But still, I would have you protect Stella beyond all else. If there is a choice between Gemor and my daughter, well, that is an easy choice for a father to make." He worked his jaw and seemed to deflate. "It would be a poor apology if I didn't offer recompense. Can I aid you somehow? Give advice on your 729 class development. It is the most important build choice you will ever make." Nathan considered the older adventurer. Giving the apology seemed to have taken a lot of effort for him. He was the most powerful mage in Gemor, on the same level as most of the archmages of Giant's Rest. He'd also been more of a barrier than a help to Nathan, and this apology boiled down to a request to protect Stella. Not entirely. He had to swallow his pride. And what's the harm in accepting? He gave me some offhand tips early on that turned out to be pretty useful. Both he and Cullel were important to developing my anti-magic. After a brief pause, Nathan replied, "Stella's my teammate. Once we cross the horizon, I don't know what we'll face, but I want the heirs behind me for whatever comes, all of them, whatever it takes." He met Dalo's eyes evenly and received a small nod of acknowledgement. That was what Nathan was willing to offer, and he was glad it was enough for the mage. "I have two main choices," Nathan continued. "One class that focuses on single enemies, preventing my foe from running away and giving me bonuses against them. The other enlarges my anti-magic to the size of a battlefield and lets me control what magic I shut down." Dalo answered quickly, with only a few moments of thought. "The second class. Beyond level 729, you must dominate a fight no matter its size, or else your enemies will avoid you and target your allies. If you can strip magic from one side, then your enemy must deal with you. It is also a better support for the heirs." He flicked his hand idly, suddenly reconsidering. "Though the larger aura and the ability to leave some magics untouched will benefit any ally immeasurably." He smirked, pleased by the thought. Imagine Stella, able to unleash her power without a need to defend herself against her foes, or Arl, fighting with his full arsenal against a foe limited to mundane weapons. Kache unleashing his divinity against foes with no magical defenses. The old man chuckled lightly. "A blasphemous build to deny magic to your foes while leaving it to your allies." He cocked an eyebrow at Nathan. "Would you be able to use magic or enchantments yourself?" Nathan shrugged. "I doubt it. It depends on what the control skill is. But that doesn't fit with the theme of the class. Ever a risk when developing classes." The door opened behind them once more, and the rest of the heirs came out, accompanied by their parents. Both Cullel and Stella's eyes were red from crying, and Stanel looked sad but proud. Kia stepped forward. She was in full armor, and she clasped her hand against her breastplate in a Gemor salute. "It is time for a farewell." Chapter 27. The scent of divinity. The heirs stepped away from their parents, standing to one side of the garden. The trees around them rustled in the breeze, and the glow from the world above lit the scene in a soft blue. Kia's expression was solemn as she walked into the center of their group, facing the heirs. She clasped her gauntleted hands together as she prepared to say farewell to her son and the heirs of Gemor. The Valkyrie exhaled slowly, and a gentle golden glow rose from the ground, the light glinting off her polished armor. The magic was a slightly different shade than Kache's, the emotion emanating from the magic feeling prouder but less hopeful than Kache's. Just like them, Kia fights to end the threat. Kache fights for the promise of the future. "By my own shard of divinity, may your path be righteous and clear," Kia began, her voice strong and unwavering. "Damon is the god of righteous battle, and with his stolen power I bless you with wisdom and strength. In the moments of smoke and blood, may the light of the divine guide you to valor and to victory." The magic billowed out around her, centering on every member of the heirs except Nathan, and giving them their own personal spotlight. She turned to face Kache, her eyes burning and her expression proud. "My son, you have carried my flame forward into peril and burned brighter than any prophecy I could make. Belief is your shield, and your hammer is justice. Stand as a beacon of hope to the innocent, and I will always be proud of you." Divine mana bled out from her and formed a tether with Kache. To Nathan's senses, it felt like just half of a ritual inviting a response. Kache felt it and picked up where she'd left off. "So do I swear," he returned, his voice deep and resonant. "For I am a shield of hope, and by my class do I bind myself to divine duty. I shall protect those in need of protection and strike down those who harm the innocent. There is no other path I will follow." The divine mana tightened and flexed, invoking wizardry as Kache spoke his oath. Everybody else took a few steps back as a swell of magic spilled out of the fabric of Davrar. It circled Kachai, waiting for one last ingredient. Kia was ready to provide it, her hair rising into the air and glowing with light as her voice cut through the world. Then, I bless you with my power. Carry my hopes with you on your journeys, no matter where they take you. I charge you before Davrar to fulfill your oath and redeem the power of the divine from the sins of the old gods. The magic around Koch suddenly compressed in on him, condensing more power than a mere person should be able to bear. He lifted into the air, head thrown back in a silent scream. The glowing magic sunk into his body, vanishing as if Kachai was absorbing it. To the naked eye, it looked like streamers of golden light flowing into Nathan's friend from every direction. Nathan watched the process carefully, using senses beyond the visual to examine the magic drain away from the world and into Kachai. It was like how divine magic emerged from the fabric of Davrar when Kachai prayed and cast his spells, but in reverse. It seems to be piercing the barrier that separates the physical world from mana pools. But neither Koch nor his mother have a mana pool. They just summon divinity and it comes. But now it's like that blessing is returning to his mana pool, augmenting it. Arcane Insight 2 achieved. If that was what it was doing, then Nathan couldn't see it. He took a breath and narrowed his concentration. He ignored the physical light show and the amazed expressions of the heirs and the guardians of Gemor. He spent focus and centered his entire world to the place where magic and wizardry vanished across the dimensional barrier to reach across to the other side. The power seemed to be vanishing into nothing, but as it passed across into the metaphysical world of mana, it sketched out a shape on the other side. Nathan caressed the edges of it with his senses, finding something closer to a crystalline shard than an ovoid mana pool. I think that's the shard of divinity he claimed that night way back when, before we fought the Ashblood Cobras. Nathan dedicated all of his concentration to the invisible object, trying to batter through whatever was preventing him from perceiving it. The wizardry and mana alike flowed smoothly into the shard, and it grew jerkily, sprouting new metaphysical nodes that had no connection with physical reality. Kachai's divinity is growing stronger. This ceremony is permanently empowering him. Congratulations, you have developed the wizard's detection, utility skill into mystical discernment. Utility skill, mystical discernment. Magic becomes apparent to you, including mana, wizardry, and divinity. You may expand and direct the reach of this sense by spending focus. With the skill development, Nathan could suddenly perceive a whole extra layer of magic to the ceremony, guiding and shaping the mana and wizardry. He sensed the ordered crystal growing in the place Kachai's mana pool would normally be, and the slightly smaller and much more jagged one attached to Kia. Then the influx of power came to a halt, and Kachai settled gently to the ground, panting from exertion. The immaterial crystal pulsed with energy, and his eyes lit like portals into a world of light. He turned towards Kia and bowed slightly, seemingly unable to find words to describe what had just happened. Nathan didn't have much longer to ponder his new senses before the gentle heat of Kia's eyes found him. "Nathan," she said, her voice carrying a true fondness. "Your deeds ring across Davrar. I cannot bless you directly, but know you have my approval. In Housemate I said I would hunt you down should you become a monster." She rolled her shoulders as if shrugging off a heavy burden. "I no longer bear that fear. You have acted with righteousness in terrible circumstances, and I pray for your continued ascent. Is there any final insight I can grant you?" He gave her a sly smile in return, holding back a laugh. "You already did." He gestured towards Kachai. "I can sense divinity now. You both have shards of it, in the places most mages have mana pools." Kia's laugh rang out like clear bells, joyous and free. "Then your path may extend to the dead gods themselves, that you may ensure they never rise again. You know my fears. Both of you carry that mission forward into the broader world." Her words were vague but encompassed both Katja and Nathan, and out of the corner of his eye Nathan saw Stella exchange a puzzled look with her parents. I suppose Kia hasn't told them how she's scared of people reviving the old gods, the ones killed in the ending of Deicide. I didn't realize it was that close of a secret, but it really is the basis of both her and Kachai's paths. They're not worshipping their gods, they're stealing from them and crafting a new divinity all their own. Is Kachai going to turn into a deity at the end of all of this? Kia raised both of her arms to encompass all of the heirs, her face split in a broad smile. Go. Leave Gemor and spread the blessings of your deeds across Davrar. It would be selfish of us to keep you here, she continued in a softer voice. Make us proud. The heirs all looked around at each other, the moment of ceremony broken. Stella shrugged and cast fly a few times. The heirs all rose into the air with a few waves and then took off. They headed west towards Agman first, attempting to throw off any pursuers tracking them. They flew straight over the streets of Gemor and over the walls to exit the city. Nathan peeled apart the single detection web over the wall to let them fly through without problems. The night grew darker as they flew, with clouds blowing in to hide the world overhead. With Kachai propelled by streamers of golden light, it wasn't the stealthiest exit, but nobody attacked them on the way out. That was a win in Nathan's book. They flew in silence for a little while, eventually changing their direction to fly south towards Litcliffe. They were over the ruins of Old Gemor, far from the transit roads. The city of Gemor was a beacon of civilization in the distance, contrasting with the darkened ruins below stretching in all directions. Kachai's magic shed a glow that illuminated the airs, but it wasn't bright enough to light up the ruins below. Eventually, Sarah called out a halt. It's late, she pointed down and to the side. There's a high building that would work for camping. My eyes see no monsters. Nathan squinted in the direction she indicated. Despite his perception skills, the night was too dark to see anything but a formless blob. From here it looked like a jagged tooth racing up towards them. Lead the way. They all followed Sarah, soon enough finding themselves in the upper floors of a tall conical building. The top had collapsed at some point, crushing several buildings nearby, and the wind gusted through the shell that remained. But it seemed isolated from the monsters that prowled at ground level. The heirs could easily defeat anything that called Old Gemor home, but that wouldn't be conducive to getting a good night's sleep. They scouted out the upper floors carefully, finding them deserted before settling down for the night. Arl pulled Nathan's bedroll out of his dimensional storage, laying it on the ground. He shot a grumpy look at Nathan. Kachai got a blessing, but you got a skill development. Seems you stole the true treasure. I don't think so, Nathan replied, scanning the entire tower with his magical senses. Kachai's magic is better in every way because of that blessing. He can cast more spells faster and they'll be stronger. I can just detect divinity. He yawned and rolled his shoulders around, though that is probably the first step to learning to break it. He glanced over at where Kachai was settling in for first watch. Did I get that right? Do you feel like your divinity is stronger? What does it let you do? Kachai nodded slowly from where he sat, faint wisps of golden light playing around his fingers. I developed Shard of the Divine to nascent divinity. It expanded my faith pool and increased my regeneration rate. My magic feels deeper now, a lake where it was once a pool. Ha! Welcome to the halls of the bold, Stella said gleefully. Carefully hoarding resources is for those without weighty talents. Kachai didn't respond, and there was a moment of silence before Arl broke it. Waking giants, I wish we could sleep in Gemor. I miss a real bed, he grumbled, patting down his bedroll. Blasphemous assassins, attacking us is one thing, but keeping us from our beds is the real evil. Sarah snorted from where she was settling into her own bed. Soon enough we'll be on a ship. From the stories I've heard, that will be even less comfortable. Why are we using a ship? Stella chimed in uncertainly. Couldn't we just fly across the sea? We're pretty fast. Then we wouldn't need to go to Litcliffe at all. Kacha shifted slightly, getting more comfortable as he kept watch. We would have to fly for days without pause, maybe weeks. I do not know the width of the ocean or the direction to our target. I cannot remain airborne that long, and you cannot remain awake that long. Oh, Stella said, then rolled over to snuggle into her nest of blankets. Never mind. Nathan climbed into his own bedroll. His wasn't enchanted like the others were, but it was still luxuriously bulky in a way only possible with dimensional storage. Right now we need a ship. In a few years and a few hundred levels. Maybe we won't. Kacha chuckled, but didn't keep the conversation going. The heirs fell asleep quickly, leaving Kacha to keep watch and meditate upon his talent development. The next morning, Nathan opened the conversation as they were all packing up. I should choose my level 729 class before we get to Litcliffe. You could wait, Arl reasoned. Hold the choice until you meet the questers and see the shape of our task. He got a series of unimpressed looks and continued in a sarcastic tone. It would also let us catch up to Nathan in levels. What are your choices? Kacha asked, ignoring Arl's comment. 5, like I said. End of Magic makes my anti-magic bigger and more potent. Nullmage lets me make enchantments out of anti-magic, Slayer of Giants. Makes me stronger and more noble. Undying makes me hard to trap or kill. And Warden of the Arcane lets me mark people who have done evil so they can't run and gives me advantages against them. Any initial thoughts? End of Magic, Stella said with a snort. It's like your choice is between the glass of an enchanter class and the gem of an archmage class. Arl shrugged. Slayer of Giants so you can punch hard enough to matter. More noble, Sarah said, chewing on the word. Seems like a prophecy of idiocy. She looked back to Nathan. With Nullmage you could enchant my bullets with anti-magic. That would be blasphemously powerful. Nathan nodded slightly. Yeah, but that seems like the only real improvement to actually fighting. The other benefit is making better anti-mages. Stella's expression grew thoughtful. What is the wording on Warden of the Arcane and End of Magic? Those classes are the ones that will serve our quest. Nathan related the full descriptions of the two classes. Those are the two I'm most interested in. Do I want to cover a huge area or be able to mark out specific targets? Dalo's advice was to take End of Magic. Kacha gave a slow nod. I agree. The ability to overlap our auras would be a true edge to hold, and detecting evil deeds is a power I already possess. Nathan blinked at the comment but didn't challenge his friend. He looked around at the other heirs. Okay, I'm going to think about it for a bit longer and we should discuss it more, but the choice seems to be End of Magic. They talked about it on and off over the course of the day, but everything came back to the fact that Nathan's anti-magic was the strongest part of his build, and everything was built around it. He could improve his strengths or shore up his weaknesses, and a pillar of the Adventurers Guild of Gemor was that a team's purpose was to shore up each other's weaknesses. The heirs could do everything else, but they needed him to fight against overwhelming enemy magic. They camped in the barren hills not far from where they'd fought the Ashblood Cobras so long ago. Just after dark, Nathan made his choice. Congratulations, you are now the End of Magic. As a reward for clearing a grand dungeon, all of your existing class skills have developed, and you have unlocked 3 new class skills. Class skill Deepened Stamina has become Bottomless Stamina. Your stamina capacity is increased by a factor of 10. Stamina will accumulate during periods of rest, and can be spent to improve the speed and strength of your movements, or used for other skills or talents that utilize stamina. Class skill Void of Feeling has become Indomitable. You are detached from pain and injury, and mind-affecting skills will be ineffective against you. Class skill Anti-Magic Momentum has become the undeniable strike of the anti-mage. Your blows will shatter magic. The greater your speed, the more powerful your anti-magic. Class skill Raging Thrill has become Stamina Burn. You can spend stamina to greatly increase your strength, speed, and resilience to damage. Class skill Implacable Inertia has become Momentum Mastery. You can control your inertia by spending stamina, making it harder or easier to change direction. Magical effects cannot change your direction unless you wish them to. Class skill Unarmored Resilience has become Stoneflesh. Your body has dramatically increased durability while not wearing armor. Class skill Magic Anathema has become Arcane Nullification. Your anti-magic talent is dramatically enhanced, and your aura is more potent at destroying enemy magic. Class skill Airborne Agility has become Galefoot. You stride easily through the air, able to move with the wind. Your stamina is much more effective when spent to enhance your movement. Class skill Hand-to-hand Expertise has become Close Quarters Mastery. You excel at unarmed combat. Class skill Voluminous Aura has become Boundless Aura. Your aura is massive. It can reach extraordinary distances and still carry the strength for action. Class skill Denial of Wizardry has become Denial of Mysticism. Your anti-magic can degrade any effect that does not originate from physical reality. The better you understand the unnatural phenomena at play, the greater the effect. Class skill Mana Severance has become the ending of magic. You can use your aura to cut a target off from magic, destroying their source of power and preventing them from ever using magic again. Class skill Aura Projection. You can spend stamina to enhance your aura, increasing its size and the speed at which you can extend your anti-magic. Class skill Selective Dispel. With concentration you may designate certain magics as permitted, letting them take effect even while under the influence of your aura. Your body is still anathema to magic, and you cannot personally benefit from spells or enchanted items. Class skill The Living World. Your anti-magic enforces neutrality on the world around it, draining corruption and cleansing blight of every form. Where you pass, life can thrive once more. End of Magic is now level 731. Oh, that's what clearing a grand dungeon does. Chapter 28 A Polite Welcome. Nathan inspected his new class description with slack-jawed surprise. There were just so many new things. Each previous class development had given him 3 new class skills and developed 2 or 3 of his existing class skills. But this time, every anti-mage class skill had improved, in addition to 3 new skills. What occurs? Sarah asked with a raised eyebrow. She'd noticed his expression and drawn attention towards it. Soon enough all of the heirs were paying Nathan their undivided attention. He swallowed and blew a breath through pursed lips before speaking. I know what the bonus for clearing the grave of all giants is. Every single one of my class skills just developed. Stella was quickest on the uptake. All 12 of them. Her voice was excited, almost giddy. Nathan nodded. Yup, well, those are some upgrades, and the new skills are incredible too, I think. That last one looks like it's either completely useless or going to absolutely save our asses at some point. Based on what I felt from the grave tangles, probably the latter. Arl chuckled slightly. Every single one of the heirs was gobsmacked, but he seemed the most sanguine. Dad always said the 729 skills were the most potent. What did you get? He asked the question with a hint of hunger in his voice. Nathan was happy to answer. They were in the middle of nowhere with nobody around, and he was blocking magical spying. Aura Projection. I can spend stamina to make my aura bigger and faster. Stella rolled her eyes. It's already blasphemously large. It's a trial to avoid it with my spells. Nathan smirked at her and continued. Selective Dispel. With concentration, I can allow certain spells to behave normally within my anti-magic. Kachi started chuckling, glancing at Stella with a smug expression. The expected boon. My third skill is the Living World, Nathan said, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly, which I think comes from the insight I got from the seals. Don't bait the castle bear, Sarah said wryly. What's the secret of the seals? Kachai's raised a quelling hand. You spoke earlier that this knowledge was dangerous. Think carefully if we must know. Nathan shrugged. I don't think any of you are in a position for this knowledge to be dangerous. All the questers know anyways, and I have a suspicion that we'll end up embroiled in these things one way or another. He gestured up at the night sky above them. The patches of white and black on the world overhead, the blights, they're each centered around a seal. So if you break a seal, the magic spills out and blights the world around it? Arl asked. Not quite, Nathan replied. Seals regulate and filter the ambient magic of the local region, preventing harmful mana from building up. They also slowly charge up a massive mana pool and then release all of that energy to the sun on the solstice. I'm not sure what would happen if you break one. Probably a minor blight. And the sun wouldn't get as much power. I wonder if that's ever going to be a problem. Maybe it's a few endings down the line. The sun going out could be the ending of silence. Stella and Kachai both looked like they wanted to talk, but Nathan held out a hand to indicate they should hold their questions. The problem is that the settings on the seals can be changed, so instead of purifying the ambient mana, they corrupt it. Did either of you feel how those grave tangles were trying to corrupt the world, blacken it so nothing could live on that battlefield? Stella shook her head, but Kachai nodded slowly. It was a bleakness. Corruption is a good description. Arl shot a confused look at Sarah and raised his hands helplessly. I just killed the undead in front of me. Nathan smirked at his teammate, his tone playful. There's more to fighting the bigger threats. His voice grew more serious as he looked back to the rest of the heirs. I think that's what the blight is. A seal that corrupts the land around it. He pointed upwards at one of the patches of blackness. Far around it. If the seal of Gemor was corrupted, I think the blight would spread from Giant's Rest to Agman, probably further. What are the colors? 2 kinds of corruption, Stella asked, indicating the speckles of white overhead. I think so, Nathan responded. There were 3 settings. One purified the mana, what's happening now. Another spread a kind of corrupted death mana far and wide, and the third was some strange combination of crystal, fire, and light. The death is the black patches, the crystal and light are the white patches, I think. Kachai stroked his chin thoughtfully, intently focused on Nathan's description. What causes this setting to change? Is this why our traditions are to guard the seals on the solstice? I think during the solstice anybody or anything could flip the switch. If a monster ever breaks through to the seal during the solstice, then it could make the change. I think the setting can only be changed once each solstice. Wonderful, Sarah said with emphatic dryness. Another catastrophe. Davrar itself is the dungeon. Nobody had a response to that, so they all sat for a moment before Stella broke the silence. What does the living world do? It says it drains corruption and cleanses blight of every form, Nathan responded. Turns me into a mini seal, I guess. Arl snorted. Who needs ancient magical constructs when you have antimages? Sarah rolled her eyes at her brother. What of your other skills? Any dramatic developments? A few, Nathan said. My stamina is now 10 times the base level. I can ride the wind, so Stella's wind gusts should be able to hurl me towards somebody. My antimagic is even more general, and I think it can affect divinity now. I lost my rage skill, but now have the benefits without the downsides. He shrugged. Almost everything got better. The heirs launched into more questions, and Nathan could see their own eagerness to reach level 729 and share in the same bonus that they'd all gotten from finishing off the grave of all giants. We just need to stay alive that long. It's going to take so much time to recharge your stamina, Stella complained, extending a plasma torch in his direction. The next night, Stella approached him cradling a deep purple flame. I've got a few questions about an improved fireball spell, she said, holding out the fire. I've enhanced the fire mana to feed from what it burns, but when I tried to work that into the fireball spell, it unbalances the spell work. Shouldn't you be working on water mana? Sarah asked from the side. It seems a key weapon for an ocean journey. "I'm following my flame," Stella said, indicating the strange fire she was holding. Nathan blinked down at the flame. He couldn't tell exactly what was going on, but she seemed to have somehow made a feedback loop so that the fire mana fueled itself by reducing atmospheric oxygen. It wasn't perfect, but it seemed like it would make the same amount of mana produce more energy by drawing energy from the things around it. Then he parsed the actual question. "Ah, yeah. I got some hints into an improved fireball construction from the Academy. I also had some thoughts about how you could use a jet of fire to propel the fireball faster." Tutoring 7 achieved. A few uneventful days of travel later, they walked towards the gates of Litcliffe. They'd landed out of sight of the city and were approaching on foot to not appear too flashy. Arl's armor was hidden under his clothing, Sarah's bandolier was tucked into a dimensional bag, and Kachai's armor only reflected slightly more light than it should. They walked along the remnants of an ancient road, but it was closer to hard-packed dirt than a true road, with the occasional paving stone sticking out of it. It looked like a road with a lot of traffic that didn't get any maintenance. The heirs crested a rise and beheld Litcliffe for the first time. The dirt road sloped down from the hills towards the dark ocean that covered a third of the horizon. A large inlet cut into the land, with Litcliffe at the end farthest from the sea. Cliffs rose to either side of the body of water, making it almost a fjord. The city sprawled around the tip of the bay, buildings scattered over the slope down to the water and the cliffs to either side. A tall wall surrounded the city with a singular gate in the very center. Once more, Nathan's breath was taken away by the sheer scale of Davrar. He'd seen the ocean on Earth, but something about this ocean made it seem larger. After a moment it clicked. The waves were enormous. He was miles away, but he could still see the swells from here. When he squinted, he saw the flash of spray in the air as they pounded against the far-off cliffs. Those waves must be massive, 100 feet or more, and it's a pretty calm day. In contrast, the waters of the large bay holding Litcliffe were calm. It looked like the huge waves died away to nothing right past the mouth of the inlet for no obvious reason. Fishing boats plied the smooth waters, and he could see a rakish clipper ship shrouded in a small cloud of mist sliding across the smooth waters towards the city. Nathan turned his eyes back to the city of Litcliffe. The buildings marched down the slope to the water, dense and solidly made of stone. But there was a crudity to them that told him they weren't ancient constructions. This wasn't a city like Gemor, built upon the bones of the ancients. If there was a ruin or a dungeon here, then it wasn't visible. The cliff to one side of the harbor was carved into the facade of an elaborate structure, palatial and grand as it surveyed the wide docks. Several towers held structures that Nathan had to squint to see were large siege engines, heavily favoring weird ballista shapes with 3, 4, or 5 arms. There was nobody else on the road, though the dirt path looked well-traveled. The heirs approached the city, ready for attacks from any angle. This was where the assassins chasing them had come from, after all. Stella had raised the most inconspicuous barrier she could, and Nathan and Kachai were in front. Everybody had a hand on a weapon, though that wasn't unusual for people traveling the wilds of Davrar. Nathan raised a hand in greeting to the trio of guards on the singular gate as they walked within yelling distance. Hail! Between his stealth skills and his mental defenses, the heirs had all agreed that it made sense for Nathan to take point in any conversations or negotiations that took place. He carried a small bag that looked like it could be a dimensional sack. With only basic clothing and shoes, Nathan looked like a farmer or villager here with an adventurer escort. His aura had expanded with his recent class-up, but it had also grown even easier to control. He was spending a faint trickle of stamina to keep it almost fully drawn in. High-tier disguise 5 achieved. The guards eyed their party carefully, eyes flicking from Arl's greatsword to Stella's robes and Kachai's face. An older man stepped forward, droopy mustache hiding his face. "Gemor adventurers, purpose in Litcliffe," Nathan shrugged. "I'm looking to catch a ship." He examined the guards as he did. They seemed to be a cut above Gemor's guards in attitude and equipment, armed with enchanted weapons and standing lightly as if ready for a fight. They're the primary military force of Litcliffe. Gemor has adventurers for the real fighting, and the guards are to provide security and keep the peace. Military versus police. Here the guards do both jobs. One of the man's eyebrows lifted and he paused to study the airs. A faint mental skill pushed against Nathan but withdrew just as quickly. He nodded gruffly and beckoned them forward. "You're the heirs of Gemor. We've been expecting you." That sentence made every one of Nathan's friends tense. Stella's magical shield flared bright and golden light gathered around Kachai's armor. The man shook his head, hand dropping to the mace at his belt. "No need to spit salt. The oligarchs know about your complications. We don't want fighting inside the city. Wait here and I'll summon your escort." The mustachioed guard stepped inside the gatehouse, and Nathan tracked the signature of the enchantments on his gear through the wall. The man moved with purpose through a few rooms and activated some kind of message, enchantment. Nathan couldn't decipher the contents of the communication, but it was definitely sent back into the city. There's a chance they just called for reinforcements. Maybe I should reactivate my jamming field skill and block message. That just seems like a way to cause confusion and reveal a card we don't need to show. The guard returned to join his fellows, giving them a shallow nod. "Shouldn't be long. Joust is quick. Stay with him in the city unless you wish to be cast into the sea." Nothing happened and the silence stretched awkwardly. One of the other guards started whistling a jaunty tune. Then a tall man strode out of the open gates, whistling the same tune. He was lithe and toned, wearing armor that was molded to his form, and duplicated the anatomy underneath it. As he walked, the plates of metal attached to his body bent and flexed, not seeming to encumber him at all. His only other clothing was a loincloth over his groin, though it looked like the armor continued underneath it. He had a bow and quiver on his back and an oddly shaped club at his waist that buzzed with powerful enchantments. He sauntered over to the heirs while looking each of them up and down. "You must be the heirs," he drawled out the words. "I'm Joust, and it's my station to prevent any mishaps while you're in Litcliffe." He finished sizing them all up and approached, holding his hand out to Arl. "You must be Stainel's get. I've always wanted to clash with him." Arl stepped forward, taking the other man's hand and shaking. "I've heard of your deeds. We follow your light." The two fighters seemed to engage in a brief battle of strength disguised as a handshake. But both of their hands were gauntleted in enchanted metal. Neither showed any sign of discomfort as metal creaked in their grasp. Joust chuckled. "Well, you're a young blade serpent. What's your purpose here in Litcliffe? I warn you, the oligarchs will decline your audience. Too much risk." "Blasphemous luck that we don't wish to speak with them," Arl replied easily. "We're looking to hire a ship. Are the docks going to decline us too?" The man barked out a laugh, then turned and gestured for the heirs to follow. "No, but the captains might." He set a fast pace, crossing through the gates at a steady walk that nonetheless ate distance as if he was jogging. It looked like some sort of talent or skill that let him cover more distance than he should. Once on the other side, he shot a curious look back at them. "Why are the heirs seeking a ship? Doesn't your destiny lie in Gemor?" Arl just shrugged, and Joust's gaze traveled over the rest of the heirs. When it landed on Nathan, he felt a slight pressure. There was something encouraging them to answer, to elaborate. Stella shifted uncomfortably, but none of the heirs replied to the question. If we needed a reminder that this is hostile territory, that wasn't a bad one. This feels like stepping into the Ashblood Cobra lair, but the Cobras are all cozying up to us first. But we don't want to fight a city, much less a neutral city full of bystanders. If Joust was put out by their silence, he didn't show it, merely turning around and gesturing down the road that sloped towards the harbor. If you needed an escort to find the harbor, I'd call you a fool, but I'm lashed to you nonetheless. Follow." He set off at a fast walk, covering distance at what would have been a dead sprint for a normal person while shooting a challenging look over his shoulder. "Should we even follow?" Sarah said with a frown. "He's supposed to stay with us." Arl shrugged. "He's an elite of Litcliffe. He's testing us, trying to tease out our capabilities." Stella scrunched up her face. "That's a dungeon for fools. We don't let him place the target." She started forward, moving at a normal pace. Down the hill, Joust looked back, and Nathan could see the annoyed look on his face. In a flash, he was back in their faces, teeth bared in what was technically a smile. His words were mocking. "Our elites of Gemor unable to match my speed." "I want to see the city," Stella said, pointing at the plaza around them. It wasn't as fancy as what Nathan had seen in Giant's Rest, but a fountain burbled to one side and the ground had a crude mosaic of breaking waves. "I'll only regret if I don't appreciate your home properly." She met Joust's eyes levelly, and her eyes sparked with lightning. The man snorted, once more panning his gaze around the airs. "Well, if you wish to waste time. Do any of you want to move faster? I'll give you a rapid tour of the city if your blood calls for it." Once more there was the pressure of his gaze, encouraging them to take up his offer. He seemed to focus the effect on Nathan and Arl, but neither of them took the bait. "I can see your city well enough from here," Nathan said, pointing to the cliffs on either side. They were festooned with colorful buildings, and the cliff near the docks on the left side had been completely covered with a palatial structure carved into the rock. "Is that the palace?" Joust growled lightly. "It's the Hall of Tides. The oligarchs do live there, yes." "Neat," Nathan replied dryly. "Now the harbor. Thank you for listening to the story on KevinAudio.com, Chapter 29, From the Fire into the Oven. I warn you, no captain will be eager to take passengers they're unfamiliar with," Joust said as they walked down the main street towards the harbor. Tall houses built of rock the same color as the cliffs rose on both sides, interspersed with occasional squares decorated with fountains. "Let's talk to them and find out," Nathan replied absently. He was busy watching in every direction, paying attention to rooftops and other possible angles of attack. Litcliffe was the origin of the assassins who'd attacked them thus far. Having an escort was all well and good, but it wouldn't help if somebody popped over a rooftop and put a bolt through Kachai's head. At least the other pedestrians were keeping their distance. They all took one look at the heirs being escorted by Joust in his form-fitting metal armor, and gave them a wide berth. Most of the people looked like locals, though there was a scattering of sailors and a few who were dressed like farmers. Behind Nathan, the heirs were keeping a wary eye out, with Arl taking up the rear. They were using a formation they'd practiced long ago while patrolling Old Gemor. And Litcliffe was just as likely to house threats as the ruin-infested city. "We just need to hire a ship and get out of the city. We've got a veritable mountain of magical crafting materials and enchanted items to pay with." Looting Giant's Rest was profitable. Joust looked back at them and chuckled. "You're acting like a hunted herd of Nindine." He spread his arms wide. "But this is Litcliffe. Gemor might be full of adventurers craving battle, but here the oligarchs mandate peace. Fighting is bad for business." He waggled his finger reprovingly. "Do not stir these depths unless you desire a swift death." His fingers dropped to the handle of the strange club at his side as his face twisted into a grin. The expression didn't even come close to reaching his eyes. Nathan rolled his eyes. He'd been threatened by better. "Keep your pants on. We're not going to start anything." He rolled his head around, popping his neck. "But if somebody else starts something, we'll finish it." Nathan kept his eyes on Joust as he spoke, making it clear that he was including the Litcliffe elite in that category. The man's grin twisted into a derisive smirk, and he turned back down the road, setting off at a slightly faster pace. The heirs didn't speed up, and a moment later their escort moderated his own pace to avoid outdistancing them. All power games and bluffs with this guy. I think he was trying to get close to us to attack us, but he's being enough of a jerk that doesn't seem likely. Somebody who wanted to betray us would be friendlier. They reached the final stretch of road that led down to the harbor, and Nathan looked out across the docklands of Litcliffe. They were clearly the focus of the town, with warehouses and shipyards crammed onto the flat ground in front of the long piers stretching out into the water. Nearly a dozen ships were spaced around the dock, though only 4 of them looked large enough to make transoceanic journeys. One of those was the rakish 3-masted ship that had just arrived. I'm a bit suspicious of a ship that just got here. If Baddads put a Quester-sized bounty on our heads, I wouldn't be surprised if a crew diverted to Litcliffe to take a shot at us. The day was wearing on, and the fishing boats were starting to come in, ready to unload cargoes of fish and other aquatic harvests into waiting carts. In the far distance, Nathan could see where the enormous waves of the open ocean calmed down to the mirror-smooth water around Litcliffe, magic calming the water. If I had to bet, there's probably a dungeon-sourced artifact inside the palace that's responsible. Maybe it was a dungeon at some point. Joust looked back at him and raised a questioning eyebrow, sweeping his hand to indicate the docks. Nathan pointed to the closest of the 4 large ships, which was also the one farthest away from the new ship. It looked solidly used but reliable, with a boxy design around 2 sturdy masts bearing oft-repaired rigging. The heirs negotiated the docks to reach the ship, Joust falling into step beside Nathan as he approached the gangplank. He stopped at the base of it, looking up at the absolute bear of a man who was blocking the way. Those are some nice muscles. The hirsute man didn't say anything as Nathan approached. He just watched and waited, his hands inching towards the curved blades strapped across his chest. If the oligarchs mandate peace, why does everybody seem so ready for a fight? We're looking to hire a ship to go across the ocean, Nathan said pleasantly, meeting the man's eyes and giving him a respectful nod. His reply was a grunt followed by an outstretched hand telling them to stop. Then the man turned and walked back aboard the ship, the planks creaking under his weight. They waited on the dock for a minute. Joust tapped his foot impatiently while the heirs kept a careful watch in every direction. It felt a little ridiculous to be this paranoid in the middle of a busy city, but Nathan joined them. He kept at least some of his attention on their escort as well. After all, it's not paranoia if they really are out to get you. Joust has to know about the bounty, but I'm pretty sure I can just brick his armor with my anti-magic if he does anything aggressive. My new class is even faster at destroying enchantments than my old one. It only took another minute before the ship's guardian returned, this time accompanied by a petite woman wearing an enchanted breastplate and an absolutely expressionless face. She looked down on the heirs from the top of the ship, then spoke in a clipped voice. "You had a wish to travel," Nathan cleared his throat. "We want to book passage across the ocean on your ship. We can pay handsomely." Her eyes flicked over the heirs, gauging their gear before coming back to rest on Nathan. Her face gave no clue as to her thoughts, but after a moment she spoke again. "Where to?" Grimacing and glancing at Joust, Nathan replied. "Kahona, do you know where that is?" The woman snorted. "Aye, it's a Kraken's journey." Her eyes flicked to Joust, who was yawning. "But not worth the risk to me and mine. I'll go as luck to ye, but this ship won't bear ye." She turned and walked out of sight, being immediately replaced by the enormous sailor. The man glowered down at the heirs and wordlessly told them to get out of his sight. Joust chuckled. "I spoke a prophecy of truth earlier. You'll need to wait for a ship on the right tide. Might take a few weeks." Nathan was already walking towards the next option. It was the smallest of the ocean-going ships, with a lower deck and only a single mast. But its construction was sturdy, and the bottom was clad in a shell of hammered copper or a similar metal. There were 2 men and a woman playing some kind of card game on deck, and they all looked up with sharp eyes as Nathan approached. All 3 were heavily scarred. One of the men was missing an arm and the other had an eye patch over one eye. The man with the patch spoke up in a rough voice. "What you want? Why's there a beastie with you?" Nathan repeated his request, ignoring the slur directed at Kachai. "Looking for passage for 5. Off-continent." The man turned back to the other two, flashing a few one-handed signs. The other man shrugged and responded in kind, and the woman nodded her agreement, taking a draw from a pipe clenched between her teeth. The one-eyed man faced Nathan again. "What's on offer?" "Goods, enchanted items. Enough to make it worth the trip," Nathan said, gesturing backwards. Behind him, Arl pulled out an ingot of gold-blue metal, and out of the corner of his eye, Nathan saw Joust eyeing the mithril bar with consideration. Kachai spoke up in a low growl. "Healing for the arm and the eye as well as anything else." The man's eyebrow rose and his eyes darted to his companion's missing arm. "Aye, and what's the target?" "Kehona." The word soured the mood instantly. The woman reached up and took the pipe out of her mouth, then spat on the deck and spoke in a wheezing voice. "Heard o' it but can't navigate there. What's your need? Other ports closer. Could take you to Esebus. Sangrad. I don't think we want to go to other places with unknown dynamics. We risk picking the stronghold of one of Badud's friends." Nathan shook his head. "Kehona or nothing. If we found a map, could you take us there?" The three exchanged a few more quick hand signs before the one-eyed man replied, "Mayhaps, depends on the price. The tales tell it to be an unfriendly town, full of tacksmen and judges." He spat the words like curses. "Do you have a chart?" He spoke casually, but Nathan thought he could detect a thread of greed underneath the man's words. "Not now. We might come back later with one." "Are you staying in Litcliffe long?" The man shrugged again. "At most some days." He offered no further response, merely staring at Nathan with his one good eye. I swear these people go out of their way to make conversations awkward. With that apparent dismissal, Nathan turned and walked towards the third ship. This one was the largest of all and docked the farthest from shore. It was a fat-bellied galleon that stood high above the deck, looking more like a floating wooden castle than a ship. A constant stream of people carried away a stack of goods resting on the pier nearby. A pair of men with dark brown skin and red-green suits cut something like a tuxedo stood before a set of stairs leading off the dock. Their appearance was polished and slick, with long mustaches curled into spirals and shiny swords at their waists. One of the men bowed to Nathan, oiled mustache drooping slightly with emotion. He straightened up and spoke in a smooth and cultured tone. "I welcome you all to the ship of Davian as esteemed guests." The deliberate emphasis on the last two words clearly carried some significance. The man led the way up the stairs, opening the door at the top and gesturing Nathan through. On the other side was the open deck of the ship, with high wooden walls all around. But what grabbed Nathan's attention was the flash of steel in the sunlight. A dozen more men stood arranged on either side of a green carpet laid on the deck, thin swords out and held overhead in a salute. Nathan's steps stuttered as he beheld the display, and his paranoia surged. Then he mastered the sudden fear. If this was a trap, it was one he would spring and survive. But it looked more like a ceremonial greeting. He stepped forward once more, magical senses scanning their armaments, force and weight enchantments. "I bet those swords are wickedly fast and cut like a scalpel. They've also got an enchantment woven underneath those suits that'll deflect elemental magic and a couple of strikes from enchanted weapons. The enchantments are impressively standardized." Their guide spoke again. "Please, Davian awaits." He gestured towards the end of the carpet, where a small table covered with an embroidered red tablecloth had been set with a delicate tea service. There were only 2 chairs, and one of them was occupied by a tall, brown-skinned man with broad shoulders and a heavy belly. He was dressed in another red and green suit that dripped with enough golden jewelry that he looked like a Christmas tree come to life. Nathan took the single proffered seat, settling down opposite the large man, presumably Davian. The heirs stood in a cluster behind him, while Joust walked a little ways to the side, looking bored. Through his magical senses, Nathan felt the swordsman fan out behind them in a semicircle. He heard the faint clanking as Kachai tensed in his armor. Across from him, Davian reached forwards and poured a steaming dark liquid from a tall teapot into two tiny ceramic mugs sitting on an oval-shaped platter, then swept his hands above them as if to tell Nathan to take his pick. He waited for Nathan's move, eyes curious. Nathan reached forward and gingerly picked up one of the enameled cups, holding the fragile handle between his thumb and pointer finger. He sipped delicately, tasting a subtle flavor that reminded him of green tea with a hint of chocolate. He nodded appreciatively to the man and placed the cup in the precise center of the saucer waiting in front of him. No poison. The large man smiled, then picked up the remaining mug in a nearly identical grip and sipped at it before placing it down on the table. Spoke, his voice rich and deep. "I am Davian, and you are welcome aboard my ship. Tell me, do you know of the ways of Sago?" Nathan returned the smile, speaking politely. "No, but I have seen similar customs before." He gestured around at the massive boat. "You have a lovely ship, truly, beyond anything else in this harbor." Davian bowed his head slightly in acknowledgement. "I thank you for the compliment. The pride of Davian has carried me across a dozen oceans of Davrar and will carry me farther still." His lips quirked. "But it is not the finest ship in the harbor. The Grace of the Mists has just arrived, and that is a ship of the finest grade." "Oh, do you know her?" Nathan asked, then winced slightly. Davian had referred to his ship as an it, not a she, so he was unlikely to understand Nathan's question. "Her? Do you mean the captain of the Grace of the Mists?" Davian replied with a questioning tone. "Not to the knowledge of trade. Number Eolin is a captain that all learn of if they survive the seas for long enough. But few trade with her, for her business is not trade." Then the brown-skinned man picked up his tea and drained it, fixing Nathan with a sharp gaze as he placed the cup back onto the table with a clink. "Now, on to our business." Nathan finished his own cup of tea. "Business. We wish to book passage to Kehona. We offer payment in crafting materials and enchanted items." Enough to be a rich payment for such a trip. Davian's face was impassive, his gaze scanning over the buildings built into the cliffs all around before flicking over Jouse. "Still waters with deep dangers." He said it like a quote, then refocused on Nathan. "I must apologize for my poor negotiation, but neither of us will profit if you remain longer than necessary. You will not find passage aboard my ship." The big man let out a heavy sigh. "Feel no shame for this. You are involved in the games of questers, and I am awed by your courage. But I do not deal with questers, for though the rewards are great, likewise are the risks. One grand sale makes a fortune, but life is more valuable still." Nathan studied Davian for a second. The man seemed completely certain. "Could you provide a chart to get there so we can hire another ship?" Davian shook his head apologetically. "Such a thing is valuable and would involve me more than I wish." He stood and bowed slightly, gesturing for his guards to escort the heirs off the ship. Nathan stood and bowed in return. Davian's lips didn't move, but his words still came to Nathan, carried in a low whisper that seemed targeted at him alone. "I offer a weight of wisdom in return for your manners. Eolin is a piece in the games of questers, and she made haste to come here. Do not show Jouse your back, for the oligarchs are surely tempted by the wealth offered for your death." Nathan blinked, but showed no outward sign of the message as he followed his friends down the ramp. Arl made an annoyed snort and gestured towards the last ship, the sharp clipper that Davian had identified as the Grace of the Mists. "Last chance." I'm getting a bad feeling about all of this. Chapter 30 Sounds of a Flute. Nathan walked towards the Grace of the Mists with the rest of the heirs, Jouse following close behind. He was more aware of their escort's presence than ever since Davian's warning about the oligarchs. Of course, Davian had also warned him about the ship he was currently approaching. The rakish vessel had made haste to reach Litcliffe and was commonly involved in quester business. That meant they were probably there for Nathan in one way or another. In all likelihood, they're carrying assassins sent from afar, or the entire crew is after us. Who knows, they might be pirates. He considered diverting the heirs away from the ship, but if this was going to come down to a fight, then it might as well happen on their terms. He'd rather face an enemy head-on than be attacked unexpectedly. Of course, it's always possible that they hauled ass here because they're on our side. Maybe Brock sent them. He considered that. It seemed unlikely for Brox to put that much thought into things. The quester wasn't a planner. If he wanted to protect Nathan from assassins, he'd come himself. Though Nathan was pretty sure he couldn't. The terms of Badud's death meant he couldn't return to the continent for decades, and the same was likely true for Brox. As they approached, Nathan heard faint flute music. It was thin and ethereal, like a caress on the edge of his attention. The sound stayed the same volume as they came closer to the three-masted ship, indicating there was a skill at play. The Grace of the Mists was longer than the Pride of Davion, but with a much narrower hull, more reminiscent of a supersonic aircraft than a castle. The ship was made from a naturally white wood, and the combination made it look nearly skeletal. 3 masts speared up hundreds of feet from the ship's deck, each carrying 4 horizontal yardarms. But there was a suspicious lack of sails and rigging. Once more Nathan took the lead, noting the pair of gangplanks and heading towards the one to the back of the ship. That seemed to be closer to the source of the mysterious music. Just before he set foot on the gangplank, the music cut off, and a petite woman appeared on the deck, looking down on him with an intense expression. She appeared no older than Nathan and was dressed in a diaphanous white gown that reached to the ground, cinched at the waist with black ribbons. Her long white hair blended into the ephemeral fabric of the dress, and the skin of her neck and face was similarly pale and pallid. Her auburn eyes and similarly painted lips stood out in the sea of white like beacons in the fog. A crown of blackened branches topped the ensemble, woven together through her hair. She held a flute in her left hand, made of the same white wood as the ship. Nathan blinked at her exotic appearance, but the woman said nothing. She seemed happy to let him start the conversation. He looked up to her and opened his mouth awkwardly. "We are looking for the captain of this ship, Eolin." She gently pressed the hand not holding the flute to her chest. "The winds align behind you, for I am known without knowledge of my own. What is your name?" Her voice was breathy and demure, but her presence was imposing enough that the soft voice didn't diminish her at all. "I am Nathan Lark, and we are adventurers from Gemor. We wish passage to Kahona. Is that something you can do?" Eolin raised one delicate eyebrow, the white hair barely visible over white skin. "Nathan Lark has come to my ship." She said the words as if tasting them. Then her face hardened ever so slightly. "The day is nearly done, and this is not a conversation for this moment. When we meet again, we will both know more. During our next conversation, I may offer you passage. I anticipate that time." She turned abruptly and strode away, quickly disappearing from view. "What? Is that a snub or not?" Nathan almost made to follow her, but a snort from Joust distracted him. He shot a look back at their escort. The man looked vindicated. "I told you the captains wouldn't want to take you, and only an idiot challenges a captain on their ship." He jerked his head back towards the city. "Now come on, there's a room waiting for you. The oligarchs don't want you causing trouble, and they're owed a portion of what you pay for the voyage. That pays for a room at a nice inn." He turned to lead the way, walking at a more normal pace this time and occasionally checking to see if they were following. Nathan shot significant glances at his friends, raising an eyebrow to ask if they thought going along with this was a good idea or if it was time to reconsider their plans. Arl just shrugged, and Stella rolled her eyes. Sarah was too busy checking angles to the nearby siege engines mounted to defend the harbor. Kachai met Nathan's eyes calmly. "I guess we're going along with this. Feels like everybody's dialing us in for a hit. but if we start a fuss, then we get kicked out of the city. The flute music started up again as the heirs walked away from the ship. It drifted off the grace of the mists in an audacious call very different from the previous calm tune. Nathan felt an edge of magic in the music and reached out with his aura to bat away the spell. The music faded, but he could feel it out there, pressing in against the edges of his aura. Once they'd reached the end of the dock, he retracted his aura and the song returned, just as loud and pressing in against his attention. He reached out with a spike of anti-magic, wondering if he could create an interference effect like he'd done with the grave tangle. Ambush. Sarah spoke the word just as night fell, darkness covering the world as the sun switched off. The sudden shift always took a moment to get used to, and it seemed like somebody had used that to try to surprise them. Kachai's shield came up like the rehearsed action it was, a wordless shout erupting from his mouth as a golden dome 30 feet across materialized above them. It intersected with Nathan's anti-magic, and yet was not destroyed, as Nathan found his desire not to interfere with his friend's magic translated into action. The shield shuddered a moment later as several heavy blows impacted against the sturdy surface. Nathan spread his anti-magic across the street, granting permissions to Stella's magic and the enchanted gear of each of his allies. Then he turned to face Joust alongside Arl. The man had jerked slightly at the first attack, but now he stood still and watched them impassively, his hand on his weapon. Sarah spoke quickly. 4 ballistas that were hidden in wagons up the slope. I saw movement on the houses to either side. We're surrounded. Finally, Stella said emphatically, her eyes lit from within by lightning. I'll take the siege weapons. Sarah can clear the nearby buildings. I will defend the front, Kachai declared, though he kept his shield raised to maintain the golden dome that protected them for the moment. I'll cover Joust and watch for magic, Nathan said, stepping closer to their escort. This fight is more suited to the others anyway. Might as well get them some levels. Then the rear is mine, Arl said. Ready? Sarah asked, drawing both pistols and aiming them upwards. Ready, they all chorused. Kachai dropped the shield and raised his hammer, jetting forward in a flash of light. A staccato of gunfire sounded from Sarah, interrupted by the deafening crack of Stella's lightning. There was another flash of light as Kachai slammed his hammer to the ground, blasting shadowed figures backwards with a detonation of divine magic. Nathan watched the fight out of the corner of his eyes, keeping his attention on Joust. The man smirked back, staying precisely where he was and drumming his fingers on the hilt of his weapon. How would you stop me? You are unarmed, Joust asked, his words nearly impossible to hear over the sound of combat. Drain the magic from your armor and leave you imprisoned in it. Try it and... Nathan's glib reply was cut off by a broad-headed bolt slicing through his neck from the side. Skills and magic gave the projectile the potency to cut through Nathan's flesh, but the attack bounced off his vertebrae instead of severing his spine entirely. Blood fountained out of the wound towards Joust, who flickered backwards at high speed to avoid the spray. Then the man stepped forward with a small smile on his lips, eyes watching as Nathan fell to one knee and raised one hand to clasp his throat. The fighter didn't draw his weapon or speak. He just watched as blood gushed between Nathan's fingers onto the stone. His eyes flicked left and right, tracking the other members of the heirs, all involved in their own battles. At first Nathan was annoyed that he'd even fallen. He'd healed from being practically vaporized before. This blow shouldn't even slow him down, but there was definitely some amount of nerve damage and the injury just wasn't healing. Anti-healing skill. I've got one of those too in catastrophic blows, but it's nowhere near this potent. The wound continued to resist healing, and a sense of panic rose in Nathan. He crushed it utterly, gritting blood-stained teeth as he threw off the mental skill emanating from the wound and focused his attention on his neck. Immortal body didn't seem to recognize the injury as something it should fix, but that was fine. Nathan had built the talent from direct control and understanding of biology. He had the tools to manually heal this injury. He dumped stamina into the wound, first focusing on the carotid and jugular to restore blood flow to the brain. Then he fixed up the nerves in the spine before moving to the rest of the tissues. It took orders of magnitude more resources than it should have, and Nathan burned through 10,000 stamina in seconds to repair the damage. Immortal Body 6 achieved. He kept his eyes on Joust the entire time, seeing the man's satisfied look shift to concern as the flow of blood slowed and stopped. His fingers tightened on the hilt of his club, and his eyes flicked around to take in the other airs. Nathan rose to his feet and removed his hand to reveal bloodied but unblemished skin. "Were you going to hell?" he asked in an absolutely frigid tone. "Or are you going to drop this farce?" Joust scowled for a second, tensing before his face twisted into one of the most insincere smiles Nathan had ever seen. "I was ensuring you were not struck again. By the tide, you seem hale enough." A gifted actor he is not. He was definitely rooting for my death. The sounds of combat were trailing off, so Nathan cast his attention around to the rest of the airs. Sarah's eyes were on the rooftops as she slid new cartridges into her revolvers. She stepped smartly to the side to avoid a falling corpse as it finished its slide down the steep rooftop and fell into the street. The red-clad assassin still clutched a crossbow, despite the hole blown through their head. Stella's attention was on the hill above them, where the ballista had been. Now the carts that had held them were burning merrily, sending pillars of smoke into the night sky. They all looked to Kachai as he came back around the corner ahead, blood flaking off his hammer and armor as his magic ensured he looked pristine. "Sure do wish that magic could extend to me, but even selective dispel won't enable magic to work on me. Allowing magic in my aura and maintaining it while it's in direct contact with me are very different things. End of magic has leveled to 733. You have survived a direct assassination attempt by a prepared foe. Spellslayer has leveled to level 510. You and your teammates have defeated an experienced team of assassins." Arl stepped up beside Nathan, cleaning blood off the invisible axe he'd gotten from Archmage Kala Dha Drex. "Sneaky muckgrabber, almost got past me." He gestured towards Joust with the axe. "Saw the edges of what happened. Should we kill him?" "Not if we want to stay in Litcliffe. If we kill him, then we either fight the entire city or leave. And he's not actively trying to kill us, just not helping." Joust's brows drew down and he took a few steps backwards and settled into a ready stance. "If you strike at me, I will slay you all in an eye blink." Nathan snorted. "I've fought beside somebody fast enough for that. You're quick, but you're not that fast. But for an escort, you didn't seem to protect us much." "I'm not here to protect you," Joust said with an exaggerated shrug. "The oligarchs know that you're going to be attacked. They just want to be sure you don't burn down the city when it happens." He tilted his head towards Stella. "But you showed remarkable restraint fighting a maw of the deep. These assassins were professionals and they hid themselves well. You cannot expect Litcliffe to prevent such an attack." Once more the social skill pressed down on Nathan, encouraging him to agree with the guard representative. He chopped his hand down with a growl in response. "No, but this was too coordinated. You led us down the exact road of their ambush." He was about to continue when a sound caught his attention. It was the notes of a flute, the same tune that had been playing before the ambush. Come to think of it, the music hadn't even stopped during the fight, though it hadn't had any effect as far as Nathan could discern. He wondered if he should expand his aura wide and banish the music from the entire area. But that would be giving away the fact he could do that. Nathan's distraction allowed Joust to rally. What did their kill notifications say? These assassins were not minions of the oligarchs. "Assassin of Jark," Sarah said with a frown. Arl looked back at the red-clad corpse at his feet. "Seminarian of Jark." Kachai's brows drew together at the word. "A seminary of assassination, what blasphemous lessons." They didn't wield magic, Nathan pointed out. Enchanted weapons, yes, but no magic or blessings. He met Kachai's eyes to make sure his point was received. The wolfman let out a tense breath and gave Nathan a grateful nod. These assassins didn't have divine magic, which meant that Kachai didn't have to worry about them awakening one of the dead gods. Zhao seized onto the words. There, Jark, a city on another continent, not from Litcliffe. Not my station to ask why they're after you, but you killed them all. Come on to lodging, the guard will deal with this mess. Collect all of the enchanted items, Arl grumbled, bending down to rifle through the items of the assailant he'd killed and pocketing a few things. They continued following Joust, this time keeping a somewhat larger distance between themselves and the fighter. The man appeared significantly more nervous than before. We didn't kill them all. Sarah spoke up quietly and without preamble. At least 3 got away, including the one that shot you, Nathan, gray hood and fast as a Nindine. He grimaced at that news. They had very powerful anti-healing skills and a mental skill. It was a dangerous wound, Arl shrugged. Their ambush is spoiled and their team is lost. I don't think we have much to fear. Stella bit her lip, not as sure as Arl. This entire place is a dungeon. I don't like staying the night here, especially when I can't just blast everything that makes me jump. Let's make a fortress for our room, Sarah replied idly. You have earth magic and air purification spells. Forget watching the door. Let's make new walls. Sounds good, Nathan agreed. Can anybody else still hear Eolin's flute? The rest of the heirs shook their heads, glancing over at Nathan in confusion. He sighed. I could hear it since leaving the ship, some kind of perception magic. It lasted through the ambush and followed us here, Arl grimaced. If Eolin's an enemy, we should leave. She might just be unsure about us, Stella objected, or not want to get attacked by assassins. If she knew of the assassins, then she should have warned us, came Arl's quick response. Nathan groaned. We just don't have enough information. All of this seems like a mess in the making. Maybe we should just leave. Is there really no other port we can use? There's one in Agman, Kachai said with a snort. But the last time we met an orc, we killed one of their nobles. My bones say that's a terrible idea. Might be better than here, Arl replied wryly. Chapter 31 Caution in Stone. The heirs moved in formation, keeping a careful watch in all directions as they followed Joust through the city. He brought them to a wide market square just off the main thoroughfare and pointed to a wide 5-story building on the uphill side. His words were loud and boisterous. The Golden Anchor, a big inn with a fine reputation, for the oligarchs are fine hosts. Nathan eyed the establishment, noting the solid stone construction and faint burn marks around some of the windows. Fine, but we're sleeping on the ground level. Joust gave him a weird look but led them into the building without comment. The common area was only about a quarter full of the low chatter of people eating and talking. The crowd was diverse, with a broad range of skin tones, a few orcs and a couple birdfolk in one corner. A few humans in aprons bustled around to serve food and drinks. A heavy-set man turned from a quiet discussion with one of the staff and rushed forward to greet them. Joust, my salt brother, and your predicted guests, true as the tide. He grabbed a cloth from his belt and mopped his brow. We have a wonderful suite of rooms awaiting you on the 3rd floor. They're blessed by a great breeze and a view of the harbor. I'll take you there right away. We want a room on the ground floor, Nathan said, holding out a hand to stop the man. Not above it. The man pursed his lips, then looked to Joust for help. Ard shrugged and rolled his eyes but didn't say anything to support the innkeeper. The large man gave them a shallow smile. Apologies, but we have no guest rooms on the ground floor. It's all storage and kitchens and staff rooms. A storage room will work, Nathan replied, eyes calm. So long as it's large enough, we'll pay extra. The man stuttered for a moment and shot a hopeless look at Joust, who shrugged. I think we can make that work. We'll clear it out right away. Will you take a seat for dinner? Nathan shot a look back at his friends. We'll wait here but take dinner in our room. He led the way over to a table in the corner and sat, the heirs silently trooping along beside him. They knew they were in hostile territory and were happy to let Nathan do the talking. Joust pulled up a chair, plopping down with an exaggerated sigh but keeping his distance from the heirs. The seat groaned under the weight of his armor, the close-fitting metal scraping against the wood. For people who can fight so well, your ending's damned paranoid, Arl snorted. Easier to poison somebody than cross swords with them. And why the ground floor room? The man continued with a puzzled expression, ignoring Arl's comment. His social skill prodded them for an answer, but the heirs remained resolutely silent. Joust tried one more time. Then why Kehona? It's a blasphemous voyage. If you seek adventure, you should voyage to Esebus. They are attempting to cleanse the continent and need hired steel. In Kehona, you'll be outleveled by their peasants. Nathan met Joust's eyes calmly and said nothing. He tilted his head towards the door in a wordless dismissal. The other man grunted in annoyance and stood, walking over to the bar and calling out for a drink. Stella cast a quick muffle spell and eyed their escorts back unfavorably. I genuinely can't tell if he fell to a soul eater. Sarah chuckled as her eyes flicked around the room. Are we sure the oligarchs don't desire our deaths? They might want the bounty. The rulers of a city engaging in assassination. Outrage tinged Kachai's voice, but Stella's spell kept anybody in the room from noticing. That is a blasphemous thought. He paused, some of the glow fading from his eyes. But not an impossible one. Not here. Nathan frowned. I hadn't thought of Badad being able to bribe an entire city, but if he moved up an ending, it's quite possible. The question is, do we want to just get the hell out of here? Come back later without as much warning or go all the way to Agman. They're still not technically at war with Gemor. Arl looked up from where he was distributing snacks around the table from his dimensional bag. The assassins will catch up soon. We'll need to keep moving. We could lose our hunters in Agman, though we might gain new ones. I would not like to fight a legion of orcs. We should speak to Elin again first, Sarah said, popping a few small fruits into her mouth. If we leave, Litcliffe might not let us back in. I'm not so sure, Nathan said. I think she was watching us with magic after we left her ship and got ambushed. And Davian warned me about her, said that she was a piece in the game of questers and made haste to reach Litcliffe, maybe to try to kill us. The heirs digested that information before Stella hesitantly spoke up. That doesn't mean she is an agent of Badad. She could be working for Brox or Saria. Didn't Badad need to negotiate with Saria for the ending? She would have sent somebody to understand what made Badad fart ice. Sarah nodded along. And the foreign assassins that attacked us couldn't have been on her ship. They had ballistas hidden in carts. That would have taken longer than one afternoon to prepare. The same for the assassins that attacked us in Gemor and Giant's Rest. Those were good points. Nathan may have been wrong in judging Eowyn. Should we go find her now? She said that this night was not a time for conversation, Katja said with a thoughtful expression. If she is an ally, we should heed her words and speak with her tomorrow. Arl interjected his own take as he made a sandwich. Hear me, staying in the city tonight seems dangerous, but I agree we should talk to Eowyn before we go. All right, Nathan concluded. Stay the night on maximum paranoia, then talk to Eowyn in the morning. Check any new ships after that, then leave if there's nothing available. I feel dangerously exposed here. There was already one attack, and I expect more every day we stay. The broad innkeeper bustled back into the room and up to the table, bowing all the way down. Stella broke the spell and his words became audible. Room cleared, follow me. He shot a dirty look at the food they'd gotten out, then turned and marched back through a door in the far wall. Joust watched them go with a sour expression but took a deep pull of his drink without getting up. The heirs followed their host through a few tight corridors that required Katja to crouch to avoid banging his head on the stone overhead. After a couple of turns, the man gestured them to an open doorway, beyond which was a dark and chilly room that appeared to be partially carved out of bedrock. His voice was almost challenging. "Does this serve your desires?" "It will do nicely," Nathan replied with a grin, and Arl flipped their host a faintly glowing green gemstone that made the man's eyes pop. The heirs filed into the unlit room and closed the door firmly behind them. Stella conjured a ball of light and Kachai's armor glowed brightly, allowing them a better look at their abode for the night. It was a clammy and dank room that was mostly underground, the rock walls showing clear tool marks. Shelves were lined up, many of them showing signs of being emptied recently and in a hurry. "What a fabulous room," Sarah deadpanned, then sighed and started moving shelves to clear some space in the back. "It's big enough," Stella said, rolling up her sleeves and summoning earth magic to get to work. Over the course of half an hour, the heirs turned the back half of the storeroom into a bunker that would give any attacker pause. Stella used earth magic to shift the bedrock and effectively divide the room in half, installing a new stone wall in the center of the room that was several feet thick. The only access point was a zigzagging tunnel off to the side, and to even reach that any attackers would have to navigate the shelves jumbled in the front half of the room. Position secured, the heirs settled back to look over their handiwork. Sarah frowned. "A powerful mage could blast through that. Or a powerful weapon could destroy it," Arl added, measuring the width of the wall against the black sword he'd looted from Brock's. "I can prevent that," Nathan said. "I'll leave my aura around the entire room. Anybody trying to blow through that is going to have a bad time." "Only if you don't break any of our items," Arl said distrustfully. "That would be an expensive accident." Nathan shrugged. "It wouldn't be hard for me to stay awake all night tonight. I've been sleeping well recently." Kachai slapped his belly, his gauntlet ringing. "My stomach is a void. We are as safe as we can be, so let's eat." At that moment, Nathan caught the sound of the door to their storeroom opening up, and a voice called out, "By the maw of the deep, what have you done to my storeroom?" He snorted and turned to leave the bunker, slipping through the entrance to spot the master of the inn standing in the entrance with a heaping tray of food, looking around with befuddlement that was quickly turning to anger. Nathan squeezed through the shelves to stand before the heavyset man. "Sorry about the mess. We'll put it back the way we found it tomorrow with another tip for your trouble. Is that for us?" He indicated the tray of food the man held. Their host harumphed but handed over the tray of food. It was a few deep bowls of fish stew, with a side of dark bread and something that looked like dried seaweed. "I'll send more in the morning. You're not supposed to leave until Joust gets here to escort you." He gave one more annoyed look at the mess that had replaced his storeroom and then stalked off, slamming the door behind him. Nathan watched the man go, then turned to navigate the shelves. Now that nobody was watching, he was much more comfortable using airwalking to navigate the labyrinth of wood they'd left as a tripwire. "Eating that is a prophecy of death," Sarah said, pointing at the food as Nathan set it down atop the stone block Stella had left as a table. Nathan chuckled, grabbing a spoon to taste the soup. "But it would be nice to know if they're trying to poison us." He proceeded to go through and taste every one of the dishes in turn, paying careful attention to the biochemistry of the food as translated through his talent. "No poison, but it might be slow enough that I can't detect it yet. Not very flavorful, though it's been a while since I've had fish." He was still the only one to touch the provided food, the heirs contenting themselves with trail rations and a few cups of fruit juice. It had been a gift from Stanel in a rare type of dimensional bag that almost entirely prevented food spoilage. They were planning to ration it to last a while, but the harsh conditions seemed to warrant a little luxury. Given that their primary weakness was a magical attack, Nathan took most of the watch after Stella recharged his stamina. He noticed no ill effect from the meal and caught a few hours of sleep in the middle of the night when Koch and Stella took over. He mostly sat quietly in the darkness, thinking about the Liber Physicae he'd unleashed upon Gemor, and coming up with corrections to have Stella message back to Gemor later. We really did write what is basically a textbook in 3 days. It's definitely got some rough edges. I think I explained salt batteries badly, but that's because iron bridges are dumb. I should come up with a better explanation, but it's got to be short to fit in a message. In the early hours of the morning, he heard the door to their storeroom open once more, followed by somebody gasping in surprise. The voice sounded female and young, so Nathan didn't interpret it as an attack. Instead of waking the heirs, he stuck his head out of the bunker to see a young woman straining under a heavy tray of food, while she stared in confusion at what the heirs had done to the room. A simple glowing stone hung from her belt, illuminating the space in flickering shadows. Nathan waved to the girl as he slipped through the shelves. "High is that for us?" Her head snapped around to him. She was just as bemused by his appearance as she'd been by the changes to the underground room, her open-mouthed gape turning to a more puzzled look as she took in his plain clothes and lacking equipment. Her accent had a strong lilt. "I thought you folk were supposed to be grand adventurers. Yano, the best of Gemor." "Are you their servant?" Nathan grinned at her. "Looks can be deceiving, thank you." He took the tray, ready for some attack or trick, but there wasn't any magic in the room aside from the enchanted light at the young woman's waist and the bunker at Nathan's back. "All right," she replied doubtfully, then turned to go. Nathan waited until she shut the door behind her and left him in almost total darkness to return to their makeshift fortress, considering the meal for a second before digging in. It was a set of bread bowls filled with stew almost identical to the day before. He was halfway done with the first bowl before he felt a chill tiredness suddenly sweep through him. He gave a deep sigh and pushed the meal away, purging the poison from his body with a moderate amount of stamina and some concentration. Normal poison doesn't act that way and isn't that hard to purge. There were skills involved there. He went to wake his friends. Breakfast was poisoned with some kind of paralytic. "They might be trying to capture us, but they're coming soon regardless." Arl popped out of his bed like a spring, a wry grin on his face as he rubbed his hands together. A new day brings new adventures and new people to kill. Kachai was not nearly as sanguine. "This inn is full of innocents. We must not endanger them in our defense." His meaningful look panned over both Stella and Sarah. "Furthermore, I do not want to be buried in the rubble." "It's solidly built," Stella protested. "A fireball or two won't break anything." She started shoveling her nest of blankets into a dimensional bag and glanced at Nathan. "Are we ambushing them, fleeing, or pretending to be poisoned?" "Ambush," Nathan said with only a second of consideration. "They might just stab us a lot if we pretend to be asleep, and it won't be easy to get out of here if they're ready. I'd also prefer not to leave any assassins alive to try again. Let's do our best to keep it quiet." The heirs packed up quickly and prepared their ambush, leaving one magical light on inside their bunker. Arl took the closest position, readying the sudden death dagger they'd acquired from the assassin that had attacked in Giant's Rest. His armor darkened to blend into the shadows of the room while the rest of the heirs stood in a blind spot behind the door. Arl's whisper was barely audible in the darkened room. "Is this the oligarchs? Should we leave as quickly as we can?" Nathan grimaced. The oligarchs could very well be responsible for this. They'd been the ones to arrange the heirs' lodging, and more of the evidence pointed towards them wanting to kill the heirs without being obvious about it. "We'll see who attacks. Don't hesitate if it's joust." Chapter 32. A fire burns. The door opened silently, the lack of sound betraying Nathan's expectations. The hinges had squealed loudly every other time somebody had entered the storeroom. Nathan was on the wrong side of the door to see the people who'd opened it, but he could feel the enchantments on the weapons and armor of 5 assassins as they slipped through the door quickly and without a sound. Nathan disabled all of their enchantments with a second of focused attention, then stepped into view. The assassins, again clad in dark red, were focused on the bunker, and the faint light enchantment the heirs had left within, but they pivoted smoothly towards Nathan as he appeared. Arl melted out of the darkness behind them and attacked with inhuman speed, invisible dagger leading the way. The lead assassin responded like lightning. He twisted to the side in a sinuous motion, his own weapons flickering out to slash at Arl's armored throat. The move was fluid and fast, equal to anything Nathan had seen Feline perform. But the weapons weren't magical anymore. They scraped across the metal protecting Arl's neck, even as the invisible dagger grazed the man's arm. He collapsed without fanfare. One moment the red-hooded man was a twisting wraith, the next he was sprawled awkwardly across the floor like a discarded puppet. If the sudden death of their leader bothered the other assassins, they didn't show it, throwing themselves to surround Arl and attack him from every direction. But without enchantments, their weapons did no better than that of their leader. Arl accepted hits to get in blows of his own. Over the course of mere seconds, he seemed to figure out a new style, going for grazes and light injuries that his weapon translated into instant death. The other heirs watched as Arl cut his way through the assassins. Any of them could have helped, but it didn't look like Arl needed any assistance. Besides, most of their help would have been louder than the brutal knife fight happening before them, where the only sounds were heavy breathing and bodies hitting the floor. The last assassin turned to flee, but with one smooth motion, Arl whipped the invisible throwing axe out of his bag and into the assassin's back. Arl stood in the center of the ring of corpses, armored face turning to survey the bloodless carnage. Then he turned back to the other heirs, helmet peeled back from his face to reveal a sheepish expression as he touched the spot on his throat where the first man had tagged him. "I am not a master of knife fighting. Spellslayer has leveled to 513. Your party has counter-ambushed a group of Jark assassins. Better than I could have done," Nathan said, stretching his magical senses outwards to check on the rest of the building. "I don't feel any more enchanted weapons around, or enchantments in general. We might be good to just leave." "Do we wait for Joust?" Stella asked, flipping over one of the corpses to examine the light-skinned face. "His hospitality has no weight," Kachai said, stepping into the hallway and hefting his shield to protect against any further attacks. "We should leave and expect further attacks." Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but Nathan cut her off as he felt a new magical signature in his widened senses. "They're about to hit us with magic, enough to destroy the building." It felt like there was some kind of magical ritual in the front square, centered around a bonfire of fire magic. Katja and Stella reacted immediately, erecting layered shields to protect them from hostile magic, and the building potentially collapsing on them. Meanwhile, Nathan stretched his aura out, using one of his new class skills for the first time outside of practice. Aura projection allowed him to extend his aura farther than it would normally go by spending stamina. He tested it with Stella, and it easily let him double the volume of his aura by spending about 1,000 stamina. Diminishing returns kicked in after that, but he could still comfortably triple his aura before the cost added up to anything significant. And I expect the exchange rate to get better as I level up. He used that extra range now, sending a cloud of anti-magic out of the building to catch the wave of destructive magic sent towards the inn. The ritual didn't look like anything fancy, just a way for a dozen mages to pool their mana together to empower a singular spell into something capable of destroying a building. In this case, that was a blast of fire and force mana, like a directed fireball spell that would have crushed the golden anchor to powder, and then lit that powder on fire. His aura managed the spell easily, picking it apart and subsuming the blast into enough stamina to pay back his investment and more. Inside the inn, the airs felt little more than a gentle rattle and a whoosh of warm air as a tiny fraction of the spell's power carried through Nathan's anti-magic. Stella looked at him in confusion. "Was that it?" Nathan smirked. I caught the spell. Let's see what they'll try next. He closed his eyes and focused his magical perception, spending more stamina to send tendrils of anti-magic snaking towards the mages. He couldn't detect the mages' surprise at the failure of their spell, but he was sure it was there. They hesitated for a few long seconds, and one flicked out a message. With a thought, Nathan activated Magic Jammer, deciding that it was better to confuse his enemies than hold back such a minor card. The mages outside started to channel their mana into the ritual once more. Nathan studied the mounting energy for a second before he reached out and cut a few key stabilizing loops in the ritual just as it ramped up to maximum intensity. Another blast rattled the inn as the ritual destabilized and detonated. Magical fire washed over the square and ran headfirst into Nathan's aura, sparing the inn any consequences of the magical sabotage. Spellslayer has leveled to 525. You have slain the seminary mages Drorlut Dadzerga, Genzervir Gibbelmivra, Brunkt by Tasku, and Jekin Jalisborg by turning their ritual against them. Mystical Discernment 2 achieved. Nathan chuckled and gestured towards the open door. Our path is clear. The mages have been dealt with. Arl gave him a suspicious look and led the way out, the rest of the heirs in tow. They passed through the common room, which was completely empty. It looked like the inn had been recently and rapidly abandoned, with bowls of cooling fish stew sitting on the table. At least they evacuated people instead of killing them or leaving them to die. Stella opened the door with a force spell, revealing a nighttime city lit by raging flames. Every other building around the square was on fire. She shot a betrayed look back at Nathan. You tell me to be cautious in cities, he shrugged. It was their spell. I just broke it. They were the ones who decided to start throwing around that much magic. The red-haired mage rolled her eyes at him. You're free of regret when it's you that causes the damage. Sarah glanced through the open door carefully, Kachai standing ready in case of attack. I don't see any more assassins, but we haven't gotten level-up notifications, so there are probably more somewhere close by. Are we leaving the city, heading to Agman? Arl asked, glancing out of the door himself. Eelin first, Sarah replied. She's not working with them. These are the same assassins as yesterday, with too much prep for it to be set up so quickly. She indicated the deserted room. They're working with the oligarchs. She might still be trying to kill us, Nathan groused. Just because she's not working with these assassins doesn't mean she's not still out to get us. They exited the building carefully, heading towards the road that led to the docks. The stone in the center of the square was cracked and blackened from the force of the explosion, but it wasn't a flame like the buildings around it. Nobody was moving to put out the flames or fleeing from the surrounding buildings. It seemed like this section of the city had been entirely evacuated. At least the oligarchs seemed to care about their citizens. As the heirs stepped out of the square and onto the adjoining street, a phalanx of guards came around the corner ahead, marching towards them in regimented ranks. The leader held out a hand. Halt! By the authority of the oligarchs, you shall surrender and be taken into custody until the origin of this damage can be ascertained. You will be sheltered from any who seek to harm you. A low growl rippled its way from Kachai's throat at the words, and he stepped forward to confront the man. You lie. Your words are hollow and your honor blackened. You will not stop us from our goal. Harsh light spilled from Kachai, shining balefully upon the guards and forcing them to cover their eyes or be blinded. The squad of soldiers quailed before Kachai's judgment, and they seemed about to turn and flee before their leader collected himself. He stood firm against Kachai's pressure, like a rock resisting the tide. If you will not yield, you will be slain where you stand. Only the smallest amount of Nathan's attention was on the confrontation ahead of them. He trusted Kachai to intimidate or smash through the guards in their way. They didn't appear to be especially elite and shouldn't cause a significant problem for the wolfmen. Maybe we should just fly out of here. But then every archer and mage in the city would get an angle on us. There's also good reason to keep that capability hidden for just a bit longer. Nathan was keeping his attention and his anti-magic focused upwards. There wasn't a lot of magic in the area, aside from some residual fire mana in the square behind them and the basic enchantments of the guards before them. He'd stopped spending stamina to spread his anti-magic out, but was confident he'd catch any spells and disenchant any projectiles sent their way. He felt another mass of enchantments approaching from up the street, past the square. Something coming from behind. It felt like another phalanx of guards hidden under a large illusion spell. He jabbed the spell with his aura and saw another phalanx of guards double-timing it down the street towards them. What are they thinking? Any one of us could take this group out without breaking a sweat. Unless they're hiding an elite, but the gear seems to be standard. Nobody has fancy enchantments. Nathan turned to face down the new group of guards, squaring himself to meet their charge. He was distracted by a sudden flurry of flute notes that cut across the night, but the guards were far enough away that he had time to reset to meet them. The paired diversions were enough that Nathan only just noticed the familiar set of enchantments hurtling towards them at the last moment. He was slow to react as Joust burst out of a side alley, moving with blinding speed and swinging an absurdly large club at Stella as she began casting a spell at the guards behind them. Nathan's heart leapt into his throat as the fighter closed in on his friend. His anti-magic was following behind, but it wouldn't be in position to catch Joust before he splattered Stella across the street. But Aurel was. He'd been watching the alley as a potential avenue of attack, and he managed to interpose himself in time. He caught the descending club on the disintegration-edged greatsword with a flash of magical energies. Both weapons survived the contact, but Joust kept his attack going. He threw himself towards Aurel with a flurry of blows, swinging the enormous club like it was made of styrofoam. The weight of the impacts implied it was definitely not made of styrofoam, the strength of each strike causing the stone under Aurel's feet to crack as he blocked 2, then 3 attacks. It took only another second before Nathan's anti-magic caught up with the furious duel at a high enough concentration to do anything, but that was enough for Aurel and Joust to exchange half a dozen strikes. The flute music continued to build, but Nathan couldn't tell what it was doing. Besides, he was busy. Nathan's aura bore down on Joust's armor with the full weight of his class, completely draining the magic that made the thick metal flexible while enhancing its protective capability. Nathan had already studied the enchantments while Joust escorted them around the city, so it only took a fraction of a second for him to reduce the suit of enchanted armor to a prison. The sudden change threw Aurel off as Joust's next blow never came. His sword rose to meet empty air, but then Aurel dropped one hand to his pouch. The trident from the undead army appeared in his grip, half magically lengthening, so the weapon speared almost casually into Joust's chest. Nathan's attention was jerked away from Aurel as spells and gunfire went off nearby. Kachai had engaged the guards in front, and Stella had set the street behind them aflame to hold off the second group. It took a second for Nathan to trace Sarah's shots and see her firing at a dozen identical gray-hooded figures dashing across the rooftops through a light mist. All but one were illusions, but they were all dodging and firing illusory crossbow bolts that forced Sarah to dodge and return fire. The flute music grew louder, and Nathan spread his aura, paranoid that he was missing some key element. He almost didn't notice when Sarah ran out of ammunition on her revolvers. She reloaded nearly instantly, but the gray-hooded assassin had been waiting for the gap. The one that wasn't an illusion stopped and aimed, launching a lethal crossbow bolt that flew at supernatural speeds. Sarah tried to dodge, but the projectile readjusted midair to ensure it struck its target. It was the same attack that had almost killed Nathan. The rapid-fire flute music reached its crescendo in that moment, a single pure note blasting through the darkened streets. Nathan felt the sound converge through skills and unfamiliar magic to give the noise a weight that punched through his anti-magic and struck the bolt like a physical blow. The deadly projectile snapped in half and flew off course, embedding itself in the wall behind Sarah. On the rooftop above, Eowyn stepped out of the mist behind the assassin, her red lips and crown of blackened branches standing out against the white background. The gray-hooded figure was already in motion, but the flute was at Eowyn's lips, and a series of sharp notes punched into the assassin from close range, sending them reeling away and clutching at their ears. Sarah's bullet caught the assassin in the side of the head, and they dropped, the spray of gore leaving a few droplets of red across Eowyn's pure white dress. The woman looked down at the figure splayed beneath her and daintily hopped over them and off the roof, drifting slowly down to the ground and putting her flute to her lips once more. Nathan tensed at the motion, but the magic emanating from the instrument wasn't aimed at the airs. It echoed down the streets in both directions, bouncing around corners as her feet touched gently on the stone of the street. The airs gathered to meet her, Kachai flashing healing magic to ensure none of the guards he'd battered were in danger of death. Arl pried the giant club from Jouse's death grip. The weapon shrank itself to a more manageable size and slid into his dimensional storage without issue. Eowyn's red-painted lips twitched upwards into a satisfied smile as she regarded them. You are entangled in the games of the questers. Are you ready to leave this continent and make your own moves?